proposing changing it into a 5-member board. I thought we had discussed that before. We were just talking about adding an advisory committee and not. I didn't know if it was coming from city council level or not, because they're the ones that would make the adjustment.
Correct. Yeah. It has to come from city council.
Okay. I was just curious.
Thanks. Here he comes, here he comes. Hey, good to see you. You guys very well, very well. Good, thanks, John. No, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think
Very nice to meet you. I will have some.
Okay, good evening. The date is August 25th, 2025, and the time is 6:34. I hereby call to order the meeting of the Community Redevelopment Agency Board of the City of Groveland, Florida. Madam Vice Mayor, will you lead us in the pledge to the flag?
Yes, sir. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sarah, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Chair Keith Keo.
Here.
Vice Chair Barbara Gaines.
Here.
Board Member Mike Radzik.
Here.
Board Member Judith Fike.
Here.
Board Member Amy Jo Carroll.
Here.
Board Member Matthew Bauman.
Here.
Board Member Daniel Corsi. Commissioner Anthony Sabatini, absent. City Attorney Anita Garasi-Carver.
Here.
Community Development Director Timothy Maslow.
Here.
CRA Coordinator John Jones. Sergeant at Arms Lieutenant Budhu, absent. And Recording Secretary Sierra Bender, here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. First thing on the agenda, presentations. And we have a presentation tonight from Rich Niles for Woodard and Kern. Rich, would you like to go ahead and come forward?
I'll start off. TJ Fish, Director of Transportation Public Works, and with me this evening we have Rich Niles with Woodard and Curran. Also in the audience we have Amanda Boone, also with Woodard and Curran. They've been part of ongoing efforts, including Amanda's recent work on the vulnerability assessment for the city. And Rich has been helping us in numerous ways with wet utilities, water sewer reclaimed, as well as you'll hear tonight, stormwater. So this presentation this evening, it's kind of interesting because as a community redevelopment agency, I would love to come and present to you all the capital projects that we're working on in the CRA with the funds available to us. But that's not really the flavor of this presentation. It's more, here's the planning and the preparation that we're doing to enable the city to make some decisions on how we want to address stormwater. And I'll give you a quick preview that one of the things that we noted about Groveland as we studied stormwater needs is that we have stormwater needs all over the city. And a lot of those needs tie into even to the new neighborhoods. Yes, they have HOAs that hold stormwater permits, but the city still has a role in monitoring and evaluating and helping manage compliance. But here in the historic part of Groveland, really the CRA footprint, we do not have HOAs. This is historic Groveland. This has evolved over the last century. So a lot of the real immediate stormwater needs connected to our water bodies like Lake David or Lake Audrey, you'll hear tonight, it's in the CRA. It's no coincidence that your community redevelopment area and historic Groveland's footprint are the same, and a predominant amount of stormwater needs, including needs for capital projects, exist within the CRA. So with that, I'm going to have Rich walk you through it. I may contribute a little bit as we go, but at the end, we'll be glad to answer any and all your questions. Rich Niles.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's a nice regular occurrence to be down here. On the topic of stormwater, it's been a while since I think we presented to P&Z back this spring and back in February with City Council. So we keep coming back to stormwater because it's like TJ said, it's a program that really hasn't been fully developed. All right, make sure this worked. We get background noise here. So just to cover tonight, I want to just kind of revisit our understanding of stormwater and then talk a little bit about the city infrastructure, city needs.
Just a second. Let's see if we can get that turned off.
Yeah, I can keep going, but I know it's distracting. Everybody. This, you know what, this is playing an audio from a recording. I'm sorry. That's probably my fault. But it was TJ's voice. Yeah, it wouldn't be a presentation without a glitch. So that was actually the audio playing from something that was pre-recorded or my fault, I guess. So it's fixed. Okay. All right, moving on. Sorry, we just lost a couple critical minutes there. So one of the things we want to talk about is just to kind of reemphasize these needs and just some of this is a bit of a refresher. So I'll move pretty quick through some of that and then talk about how we align with funding strategies. The city's overall strategies, comp plan, strategic plan, and the CRA plan. But just to kind of revisit the basics, I mean, we talk a lot about, the public system for water, public system for sewer. We have a private component to that. Stormwater is a bit more complicated, but people sometimes mix up stormwater, sewer, reclaim, because we often refer to the program for permit compliance as the municipal separate storm sewer system, but this is about stormwater. So I just want to make that distinction. And so we have private and public systems for water and sewer and reclaim. And these are in the roadway. They're also serving properties. And then we throw in stormwater, and stormwater is a little bit different, where stormwater is kind of everywhere, and it's a little bit more challenging to understand, manage, and control. And so when we talk about this and we talk about, how we solve that and who's contributing to that, we'll get into that a little bit more, but we want, for the public's understanding to see that stormwater needs kind of exist everywhere. It's not just the downtown. We have some identified issues that have been developed, in some of the documentation, But there are private needs, and there's a city component to that sometimes. So our basic stormwater curb and gutter collection system, we have stormwater outfalls that go to lakes. The photo on the right here is Lake David, there's an outfall to that. So when we think about how things drain across the city, they get to a water body at some point. Groveland has a lot of water. You know, when in terms of water quality and water quantity issues, we have to think of both of those at the same time. One of the things that's been challenging in the downtown stormwater assessment is that we have a lack of mapping of that infrastructure. So one of the projects that we have, it's funded through an LPA grant. We're going to start doing that mapping very shortly. And so what you see here is just a section of the downtown. And if you look closely at the lakes, we have the outfalls to the lake map, but we don't have all the collection system mapped. And in some cases, there's just a lack of a collection system in the downtown in general, and that's a bit of an issue as well. So that's kind of the city's assets. The city's responsible for those conveyance systems and discharges. When we look at other assets that are private, we have, this is an example of Cherry Lake Landing. The homeowners association is technically responsible. It's a private system. They have an environmental resource permit, that's their stormwater permit that they're supposed to comply with. But then it gets challenging when events like hurricanes happen, damage occurs. The city does sometimes act as a resource because nobody knows quite how to manage this. The HOA hasn't experienced this type of issue. They're not sure if they're truly responsible for that. And since the city maintains other utilities in the right-of-way, stormwater inevitably gets kind of lumped in that category, and TJ gets the call. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to this, TJ, but this is just kind of an example of an issue that has come up as of late and has resulted in damage to the infrastructure, damage to the resource areas. And what the city can offer in this instance is technical assistance. You know, they can go out, look at the issue, but ultimately it falls back to the HOA and those private owners. So there's quite often a misunderstanding by residents as to what is their responsibility within the HOA versus the city when it comes to utilities. So we have made some attempt to inventory the citywide assets. So we looked at, you know, how many culverts, how many outfalls. This is not just within the CRA and within the downtown area. So there are other assets throughout the city that we need to think about when we look at a kind of comprehensive stormwater program. We've also looked at what is currently mapped for private assets. So in some of these numbers that are kind of relevant is, you know, almost 100,000 feet of pipe is privately owned and maintained. You've got 70 detention basins, and those detention basins are quite large. Like you see in the photo here, this is what's called a dry detention basin. And so it fills up during a rain event, and then it drains over time. So most of the maintenance associated with that is mowing, but these are pretty significant assets that those private parties are responsible for. And so I like to use this photo a little bit as an analogy. Groveland stormwater program is growing. It's kind of lurking. We know it's there. We haven't quite managed it or built it to where it needs to be, but we can solve that problem. We know how to manage it. It's going to take developing a more solidified plan and then looking at the financial approach to implement that plan. But the city, I mentioned the city's municipal separate storm sewer system. They have a permit for that. I'll get into that in a little bit. But right now, that currently covers Lake Audrey and Lake David. So those are impaired for water quality. They don't attain water quality standards due to stormwater pollution runoff, mostly nutrients. And then as we look at capital projects, it's not just looking at existing needs within the downtown. We have to consider the future impacts from redevelopment, new development. In that equation, when we look at water quality, we have to consider groundwater recharge. So there's, you know, a lot to consider with capital projects. It's not always just a matter of getting the water to the right place and managing the volume. And so when we think of stormwater, the stormwater program, Groveland has done a great job with all of its other utilities, for wet utilities, for reclaim, wastewater, drinking water management. Stormwater is sort of the last piece of the equation for the one water approach. Is you know, how are we managing stormwater, which is a vital resource to those other utilities. What's unique about Groveland, and I think this has been presented a couple times in other meetings, is you have an interesting, you know, divide within the watersheds within the CRA. So you have on the west, you have the Withlacoochee Basin, drainage basin that heads to the west coast, and then you have the Ocklawaha River Basin, which heads to the east coast. And so it's a kind of a unique divide. This is a high point. And, you know, the downtown, believe it or not, does have this high point divide. So when we think of how we manage stormwater, we have to think of what are some of the requirements within that basin when we look at other program elements like water quality. So the upper Ocklawaha Basin has numerous lakes that are impaired. It's most of those lakes within Groveland that follow the Platte-Lakaha chain up to Lake Harris. So we have to think of that in terms of anything we do with stormwater, not just downtown. It's how are we addressing some of these regulatory and water quality requirements. And the city obviously wants to improve water quality, so we want to look at that opportunity with capital projects too. Some of you may be familiar with the Sierra Ray watershed study that was done several years ago. So it was kind of a drainage study that looked at existing identified problem areas, kind of restrictions, culvert restrictions, areas that have some nuisance flooding, roadway flooding. And this list of streets is from that study. So what we did in the latest design study that we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute is we took those, and while those are kind of isolated areas, they're in different areas throughout the CRA. And there was some evaluation done to develop some recommendations, and that's kind of what we used for some of the initial capital investment needs. But this is a kind of a short list. We have more that we need to understand in terms of existing drainage issues throughout the CRA in the downtown. And so this is just an example of, we acknowledge that these problems exist. Some of them are in the capital plan. I think Garden Ave and Varnado Road, TJ, I think those are in the capital plan where, kind of small drainage issues, but nonetheless nuisance areas. So we're still working on developing the capital plan. Those are just examples of some of those projects. But I wanted to just show a little bit about what DPW actually does now. It's not that we don't have a stormwater program in the city. It's just not as robust as it needs to be to address all those needs. And so we look at permit compliance is one significant component to that. Kind of general administration, personnel management. When we're doing maintenance activities, somebody has to kind of oversee and manage that. And then we have some operation and maintenance of actual facilities, meaning, swales and ditches and catch basins and culverts that get clogged. And then there's some minor repairs. Now, when we look at what transportation public works staff have at their hands in terms of responsibility, you've got 13 full-time employees that are maintaining 95 miles of road and 110 miles of sidewalk. And then, so a lot of that resource and budget goes towards those activities. Not a lot is left over for stormwater. So right now, there's about 2 staff, about 50% of their time, that do operation and maintenance of the storm drain system, and then they do, another 2 staff do about half their time. The other half is spent doing other transportation activities and maintenance. But they're maintaining kind of the area around State Route 50, so they're maintaining the median. And I think that's through an agreement with FDOT, right? So
Correct.
That's, yeah.
Yep.
Even though it's FDOT right away, the city maintains that, and some funding comes from the state for that.
Yeah, just a reminder, the city entered an agreement about 5 years ago with the Florida Department of Transportation, and city maintains the 6 miles from Mascot to Claremont. And it was originally, let's do something about all this trash, because all the trash trucks come to Sampy Road at the tipping station. Well, of course, we mow it as well, but really a lot of that maintenance along that roadway is also associated with the stormwater system that DOT technically maintains, but we are their proxy. So just wanted to give that reminder, because we don't talk about the State Road 50 beautification project a lot, but what that is under my department to take care of those 6 miles. And it has clearly made a difference. I don't hear many complaints these days about the appearance of State Road 50, because we're constantly picking up the trash, keeping it from going into the stormwater system.
So out of the current budget, we estimate there's about 0.2 mils of the general fund that's within transportation and public works that is what we think is the current compliance program for stormwater. Includes those activities, so.
And I always like to say it's a minimally compliant stormwater program. Every 2 years, we're audited by DEP, and every 2 years, it's an awkward conversation, but we get through it.
Yeah, and so the next audit is coming up.
It is.
So, yeah, so obviously, just bare minimal compliance is never really most cities' goals, and that's not the goal here. But we need to understand, well, what are the actual requirements, what is coming down the road, and then plan for that appropriately. So the permit requirements that we anticipate coming are going to focus on illicit discharge detection, elimination, construction site, erosion management, inspection, and then increased frequency of maintenance of the infrastructure. So there are, you know, if you look at the kind of the basic level of service that the permit asks you to comply with, is maintain the infrastructure so it functions properly. So it doesn't have excessive sediment, it flows, it is, you know, free of major debris blockages. And so that's obviously in the city's best interest to do that, but that also shows that you're taking care of the infrastructure and you're maintaining water quality, you know, as part of that as best as you can. So I do find that very few communities have the resources to do it at the frequency that the permit likes you to do it at. But that's why we need to look at what is the need, how do we do it better and achieve a goal that meets the permit requirement in the future. And so part of that, the permit is also considering its additional requirements related to water quality specific projects. So don't just maintain it, but now you have to improve it. You have to address the impairments. I mentioned the impairments for nutrients. So the state is developing what they call total maximum daily load allocations for stormwater. And those will eventually get rolled into the MS4 permit for the city, which will say you need to reduce pollutants by X amount. Now that hasn't happened yet, but that represents a major potential capital obligation in the future. So when we look at redevelopment activities, we look at the downtown plan, there's a lot of existing development that has stormwater that doesn't meet today's standards. There's an opportunity as we redevelop and as we retrofit and improve the streetscape that we can try to take that opportunity to maximize the benefit for water quality as much as possible. So that's part of the idea behind the concepts we'll get into in a minute around the downtown. So we're covering a lot at once here, but I think I've already kind of spoken to some of the gaps in funding. When we look at, you know, what is driving more cost, what increased maintenance need, you know, people to do the work. That's a big part of that cost, but it's also the program management. And we often see communities at this level of a stormwater program looking to hire someone to manage the program full time instead of just checking boxes on compliance because it's a lot more effort. You're now getting into capital project management, you're getting into a lot more inspection and reporting requirements. And then you're looking at, you know, purchasing more equipment, more trucks, with more personnel comes more equipment, more expenses. So this is where we see the funding gap, and we did evaluate that as part of a preliminary study that I'll cover in a second, but you know, that's a bit of a moving target. When you grow a stormwater program, it typically happens over time. It takes time to develop, so those costs don't always hit you at once. So one of the things that when we look at stormwater programs that are developing like this, we look at, okay, how does this fit within the existing kind of vision, strategic plan guidelines for the city? And I think it's pretty simple. This message we just kind of, you know, pulled out of the available documents and said, well, effective stormwater management will help promote the city's natural charm and support our One Water vision, which is true. And so when we look at these documents, it provides a lot of supporting information for why we're doing, you know, why are we looking at this issue. It's not just because we have areas that we know need to be improved, but how does this tie into the greater vision for the city and the strategy? And so I don't want to go through each one of these, but I think when we look at the strategic plan and the 4 elements here, stormwater really supports those pretty well in some way. Then we look at the comprehensive plan. So these 4 items here in the comp plan speak well to what, you know, our stormwater program is trying to achieve. And we do need to look at the CRA redevelopment. We need to consider where we can recharge groundwater and optimize that. We have elevated groundwater tables in some places that makes that prohibitive. So, and then I think that, you know, the comp plan just speaks to conservation and infrastructure improvements. So this, in general sense, you know, it checks a lot of boxes. In the comp plan, you know, didn't have the opportunity to evaluate a comprehensive stormwater master plan or a facility plan, and that's what we're developing now. So I would expect the comp plan in the future to speak to some more specific capital projects, et cetera. But it speaks well enough to it now, and here's one example of just kind of a policy that I pulled out of the comp plan, which is, you know, there's always been a lens on protection of the green swamp, protection of resources, and stormwater requirements related to that to improve recharge in those areas. And so there's a recharge requirement within the green swamp area because it's more critical that we restore and replenish that groundwater source. So just one example from the comp plan. And so we look at the CRA plan, and we have, you know, the 4-point action plan. And this is just taken directly from the documents. I didn't put a spin on it for stormwater necessarily, but you can just look at the 4 components of it, you know, activating these opportunity sites. So these are opportunities to manage stormwater. They're also redevelopment and in some cases, infill areas. And then we look at reinforced connections, where there's an opportunity with the streetscape improvements to do stormwater along the way. Perhaps the most critical and catalyst for the downtown stormwater improvements is the State Route 50 realignment. And so when we think of, it's critical for redevelopment of the streetscapes in the downtown, for the vision for the CRA, but it's also an opportunity for stormwater management. So when we look at the map here, you can see in the upper left there's Pond A, and then kind of to the right, above the realignment, is Pond B. So those are the proposed FDOT ponds, and this is a bit of a cartoon drawing, but this is where the primary stormwater management is going to occur. And so we're looking at opportunities as DOTs realign the roadway, where can we push some of the stormwater from the city to those areas to manage it from existing and future areas. And so we think there's some opportunity there to do that, so the timing will work out well.
I want to pause on the DOT project for a moment. So a lot of excitement because the project goes under construction next year. So this time next year, it'll be under contract with the construction contractor. They'll be mobilizing. And many of you recall the Carbide Industries property off of Crittenden Street behind the 7-Eleven was purchased last year by the state of Florida. That's going to be the location of the eastern pond, Pond B, which is a substantial stormwater facility. In the early stages of coordinating with DOT, bearing in mind it's been designed since 2017, but as they were going through their plans update, we engaged is there a possibility of the city doing a shared stormwater facility that would take that location and accommodate both State Road 50 stormwater as well as the city of Groveland stormwater for downtown redevelopment. The DOT design pond is completely maxed out. So, and in fact, they are acquiring from the city of Groveland property in addition to the Carbide Industries property, additional property to the west to expand that facility because it did need to be upsized. Even after it had been designed in 2017, the plans update under new water management district rules, they had to expand it. And having if you ever look there, you'll see a large Duke Energy electric line there, and Duke would not allow us to put any level of the pond facility into their easement. So it really, and I'm sharing all this because just trying to get answers to could we possibly share. That was a 3-year effort. They ended up with a we're afraid not. So meanwhile, Pond A, which will be located on the west side of the project close to Lake Catherine Lane, that one has a little bit of capacity that could support some level of redevelopment in the downtown area around that portion of 50. And then in addition to all that, the city of Groveland will be asked to take over Orange, Broad, and a little portion of Lake Avenue that are currently State Road 50 and a little piece of State Road 19. That comes with it an older stormwater system that includes the inlets you see along the curbing of State Road 50 along Orange and Broad and piping underneath that leads ultimately to some water bodies. So I say all that because part of what we're working on now with the mapping and the inventory is accounting for all the DOT infrastructure that eventually will be City of Groveland. And there's a little bit of City of Groveland infrastructure, especially here on the hill, some piping that comes down to accommodate water before it hits Lake Audrey and Lake David. But other than that, our downtown does not really have any major additional infrastructure or piping. A lot of it's open conveyances. And in fact, I'll use, for example, Crittenden Street. The water flows down Crittenden Street to a water body that's behind the 7-Eleven, and that's the natural flow. So we're absent any kind of actual conveyance, piping, and facility that would allow certain properties to redevelop and hopefully in the downtown not have to accommodate a stormwater pond on your downtown property. That's the point of why we are bringing this to the CRA is we are devising a plan that will accommodate that stormwater in a comprehensive manner and not make it problematic to redevelop or develop properties in downtown.
Yeah, so I mean, so the strategy when we look at the CRA is to tackle stormwater in a lot of places, and that's typically what you see in an already existing developed urban area. So the pre-design study that we finished last year, it was beginning of last year, I think it was, it really focused on the CRA, focused on downtown stormwater needs, and it did speak to kind of the broader city perspective from a funding perspective. But there was really two main components that we focused on is how do we have flexible design so that we can kind of adapt certain practices that are best suited for the downtown with streetscapes and integrate that into the landscape, and then how can we take the opportunity sites or the activation sites as they're called in the CRA plan, and then utilize those potentially to do stormwater management there or in conjunction with adjoining city property. And so, these are really just conceptual level, but, when we look at kind of complete streets and the concepts that are illustrated in the CRA plan, and this is actually just a rendering. The post office is the building in the background there. And so this is kind of rendering a State Route 50 of what a complete street concept would look like. When we start to look and pepper in some stormwater control measures and stormwater treatment practices, we have vegetated filter strips, we've got tree box filters that kind of receive some stormwater and treat it within that system. And then we have, various bioretention, bioswales, rain gardens, and you guys are familiar with the rain garden that's at Lake David Park that was constructed as part of that project, and porous pavers. So considering a variety of practices that could be integrated into the streetscape to manage stormwater. So this is going to help address existing stormwater issues as well as some of the future redevelopment and development needs. And so one of the things we're doing now is to really kind of get into the details of, well, how many of these and how many places and what is it going to cost? Because there's a lot of decentralized practices here. And it's nice to have a big stormwater pond like FDOT and push it all to one place and treat it there. But you don't have that opportunity in the downtown as much, not nearly as much. So when we start to look at all the different opportunities, we've got trails, we've got streetscape improvements, complete streets designated areas, and this is just a snapshot. We try to kind of lay these concepts together and then look at the practices and sort of the opportunities for stormwater management that seem like they would fit. We're not proposing massive detention ponds. You can't do that type of practice, right? We didn't get into a lot of underground chambers or systems because they tend to cost a lot more, and we start to go underground once we have no other surface options that are easy and simple and less expensive. Plus, we also have to get a better understanding of where groundwater is. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So typically, we'll look at those as a secondary measure, but this is kind of our starting point. Now, one of the things that, when we start to think of, well, how do we do stormwater in a dense urban environment, there's no space. Well, you can create kind of pocket bioretention areas. And this is an example of that on the right. This is kind of a one-way street, complete streets approach. This is, looking at a bioretention area that really only takes up about a parking space. And because people and developers will complain, well, we don't have enough room for parking. We can't do stormwater and parking and streetscape and have, outdoor seating and eating. But you can do it. You have to be a little creative with that. And so this is actually a system that also has a cistern for irrigation to irrigate the plants so they don't die. You don't have as much of an issue and challenge in this climate. This is in the Pacific Northwest as an example that I saw. But this is the type of concept that we just want to be creative. It's not to say that this is going to be implemented everywhere. It may only be suitable in certain areas. And then, what we have to consider with all these things is the level of operation and maintenance that TJ's department is going to be saddled with. So all these practices come with some level of maintenance. It's unavoidable. Most recently, the city asked us to develop a concept for a bid package for the CDBG grant project for the streetscape improvements along Lake Ave and Cherry Street. So this is just kind of showing the area that we looked at, and we try to take the concepts that I showed you a few slides earlier and see what is the best fit. What are we really trying to address for stormwater management along these areas? And you guys are probably quite familiar with what happens when it rains outside here. There's actually areas of Lake Ave that don't really have much of a collection system at all. So the water just has no place to go and it jumps the curb. So there's definitely, a lot of water in the gutter line there. And so there really is kind of a lack of conveyance. And if you look closely at this concept plan, we're proposing putting new inlets and catch basins and then piping it across the road so we can actually treat it in a bioretention area. So this is just kind of a 20% concept level. But this is what we would expect to do all throughout the downtown, is to look at what's most appropriate for that area. Is there an existing collection system? If not, what do we propose to do? What seems to make the most sense? And then also, how is it supporting a complete streetscape approach where we're trying to accommodate sidewalks, we're trying to accommodate off-street parking and traffic calming measures too. So that's just an example. This is the type of concept that you would expect that we would evaluate in other areas of the downtown. And then one thing I kind of wanted to tie back into this, and this is something we really haven't talked much about, even with planning maybe, Tim. I think we've floated the idea of stormwater as an alternative water supply. So stormwater systems collect water, right? And there's an opportunity to reuse that. And now to do it at a scale that is cost effective and easy to manage is a little bit more challenging, but when we look at the city's requirements and what we need to do for groundwater withdrawal permitting, the consumptive use permit that the city has requires you to consider alternative water supplies. And we've presented to council and other boards of the projects that have been implemented so far. It's Waterside Point, the surface water reclaim system there, that basically takes Crystal Lake within Waterside Point, and we use that water to irrigate the property around it, right? So that decreases the demand on the Silver Eagle reclaim system, which also is fed from potable water, which comes from the aquifer. So we're basically just trying to utilize the surface water where it's being collected anyway and not having to put that demand on the aquifer. So when we look at stormwater, there's an opportunity to address groundwater permit withdrawal requirements, decrease our demand on the aquifer and the impact by capturing and using that stormwater to offset part of that equation. So one thing, we have a couple projects that are being implemented, but we're looking at a study. We have a study ongoing right now that's going to consider larger surface water withdrawal. And at the end of this month, we're submitting an application to the district, St. John's Water Management District, submitting an application to them for a regional study that would be funded through a grant. So there's lots of opportunity to tie these things together. So when we think of stormwater, what's also interesting about stormwater, even though it's challenging, is that we can also tie it to a lot of different types of projects and uses. So we kind of get this additional benefit from it, where we can tie it and support a part of a CDBG grant opportunity for streetscapes, where we just do the stormwater piece of a bigger project. And so we can quite often leverage a lot of outside funding sources.
And I want to emphasize this alternative water supply mandate is coming from the state of Florida. And it's basically saying, look at options besides sending potable water out for people, especially for irrigation. And really, it's great that Groveland can point to an actual neighborhood like Waterside Point, where the city holds the consumptive use permit for Crystal Lake to help to some degree regulate the lake levels, but it's really to utilize that captured water, and instead of potable or even reclaimed all of the time, even though the neighborhood is still connected to reclaimed, we're able to utilize now, as of a year ago, that lake as a water source. So that's a shining example of a real project right here in Groveland that was not functioning up until a year ago that we were able to restore and now utilize that, and we'll continue to look for other opportunities. On the left, by the way, is the well being put in at Sunshine. And that well, that first well, that's not for drinking water, that is literally to augment when we run out, which we do considerably run out consistently, of reclaimed water. So the demand for alternative water is very real in Florida, and the state is expecting, as we talk to them about increasing our consumptive use permit for drinking water, will show us that you're taking alternative water supplies seriously. And to Groveland's complement, we have a relatively robust reclaim system, and that's why, since we're already doing that, what can we do with stormwater potentially to enhance and augment what we're already doing? So I wanted to point out a couple of those because they're very relevant to our discussions with the state right now.
Yeah. So yeah, this may seem like it's a somewhat unrelated thing, but it really does. When we look at opportunities to manage stormwater, we can leverage the drinking water program and funding sources to help address a potential project for stormwater. So, and so really kind of wrapping up here shortly, just wanted to reiterate that this resolution was back in 2023 to develop a stormwater feasibility study. So it was to look at the stormwater needs in the downtown. And so there's kind of limited funding to do that, but that's the work that we've presented so far. Is we presented the kind of evaluation of needs, we looked at the costs, we also looked at how you might fund that. And that was looking at a stormwater utility fee. So that pre-design study report, the financial component of that really hasn't been advanced And we're still now working on refining the needs and the cost for the capital program, which obviously affects the financing need, right? But that's something that hasn't been brought before council, but that's going to be coming up soon, and we have sort of next steps. That is continued work under these first two grant and loan programs that the city has already secured. So the work that we're doing for downtown mapping, ongoing, and stormwater modeling, so we have what we call the LPA grant, which is almost $1 million that was funded by DP to look at downtown stormwater needs. And so we have money to do, planning, design, construction, and so we're going to try to maximize the benefit of that money and possibly direct some of that to the Lake Ave stormwater project, maybe look at Garden Ave and some other improvements. But that's going to help us really refine our understanding of needs in the downtown. And so that's great. It's a great grant program that's funding the assessment so far. And then we need to take that and roll that into a facility plan, which is already funded. And you're familiar with the facility plan process with DEP. It positions you for SRF funding for borrowing and possible grants. So it's really to position the city for that. And more what we're seeing, and it's actually becoming a requirement for a lot of programs for borrowing, is if you don't have a stormwater utility, you don't have a dedicated funding source or budget to support your debt service, you're not going to be able to borrow money to do capital projects. And I know we're getting into borrowing and finance and everything else. It's not really, it's a whole separate series of meetings probably. But you have the planning elements that we're pulling together to position you for that. And that's my point with the slide here. So as we get into those next steps, as we kind of detail that capital plan for the downtown, refine it further, we'll come back and we'll present that information to the board and most likely city council as well. And then start to talk about the financial discussion and finance plan again. And I mentioned earlier, there is a regional alternative water supply grant that we're going to be submitting on behalf of the city of Groveland with a few other partners, Mascot, Howie, Montverde, and Lake County Water Authority. So we've been working with TJ and staff to develop that application. And that's going to look at surface water and stormwater opportunities for alternative water supply, which I think is really beneficial to your stormwater program too. So I want to make you aware that hopefully we're successful in that grant application, but that could be anywhere from 3 to 5 million.
And we do still have the pending, there's been a lot of work behind the scenes, including the work of the ad hoc Stormwater Advisory Committee that took place in 2023. And that work was in the process of being presented to the City Council last year, and that was put on hold as we refocused on the need for the utility rates and impact fees to be addressed. And a lot of energy was put into that, and now we're back to being ready to take those next steps with the City Council to go over the work toward developing a stormwater program that has a dedicated funding source. And the reason I'm bringing that up at a CRA meeting is when you look at the direct capital needs of the city of Groveland, many of those, not all, but many, are in fact in the CRA footprint. We could exhaust the CRA budget just on stormwater needs alone. And that's why I wanted to mention this, that although the CRA has a need for us to be planning for stormwater and infrastructure and capital projects, we also are cognizant that really it's the citywide approach to stormwater that's going to be the real critical component from a financial standpoint, because if we just try to keep it to the CRA, you would largely be a CRA stormwater program. So I wanted to mention that because that's one of the things we've looked at, that we know what the CRA budget is. You're going to have that item presented next. And your capital needs, having never met the capital needs to any large degree, we've got some catching up to do. So I just wanted to plant that thought in your minds as CRA board members.
Yeah, and with that, that's all I got. Questions? Discussion?
Questions? Dan?
Sure, I'll go first. I think it was the first slide you had on there said that, and I could be wrong, it said there was about 50% of the assets or 50% of the data was missing. Is that, what kind of data is that? Is that understanding what our impervious, what our impervious surfaces are? Is it understanding where all the infrastructure is already built? What's the missing data?
It's mostly catch basins, inlets, pipes, stormwater conveyance structures. So we call it structures, not impervious area. So we do have some data for impervious area, but that's what we think is not mapped currently.
Okay. And then going off of that, do we know how much it would cost, or is that already a discussion in getting that information and getting it complete?
So the mapping within the CRA is going to be completed this summer, so that's already funded. Mapping of the rest of the city, we're going to have to look at where those priorities may lie, but a lot of it is mapped through private subdivisions, and some of the subdivisions aren't mapped, but it's not the city's responsibility. So we haven't estimated that yet, but our focus is the downtown for now.
Okay. And then another question, so the CRA boundaries, there's about, I don't know, it looks like probably 150 to 180 homes downtown that aren't within the boundary. It's like east of Lake and south of Magnolia. How do you guys account for the funds that have to be spent to manage that water going into Lake David with those funds, those TIF funds not being available to fund that, or the CBDG grants not being available through the CRA to fund that?
Right now, we would be completely reliant upon the city's general fund. So without an enterprise fund dedicated to stormwater needs like we do for water and sewer, that's really the only option. And if it were in that footprint of the CRA, we could always approach the CRA. But as you mentioned, those residents are not technically in the CRA.
Okay, and then are there grants available, are those CBDG grants available to the city as, within that general fund to be used, or is that only within the CRA? Do those grants only apply to CRA?
So for CDBG and other types of grants, no, it does not. It's not restricted that you have to be in the CRA, but it does go back to, especially if you're doing a capital project, does the city, in order to take those funds, do you have the ability to maintain it? And that's been part of our concern is if it's general fund dependent, it becomes an annual budgetary question, and that's not as dependable as having an enterprise fund.
Well, I would just add that, the CRA boundaries, so we did look at that with respect to the stormwater needs and the financial approach. So we did consider what properties within the CRA would potentially pay and what portion of that. And like TJ mentioned, it's really at a level of capital investment that exceeds the ability to do that within the CRA without having an extraordinary fee or tax increment. The CRA doesn't follow watershed boundaries and stormwater boundaries. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely something further to talk about in the future that, we did look at what's within the CRA from a funding and regulatory standpoint. But we're looking at watershed basin-wide issues. So we don't want to limit it to the CRA. So when we say we focus on that, it's just because it's what you guys have written.
Okay. I think that's it.
Ms. Fike?
Well, I had a question about the alternative water supplies, but TJ, you jumped in about 5 minutes ago and explained that, so I don't have to ask that question. Quick question, we were talking about Pond A and Pond B, and I believe you said Pond B is going to be funded by FDOT?
Both of them will be.
Both of them, answers that question, because Pond A, I didn't catch that. Finally, kind of a crazy question, the aquatic shore plants that you're going to line Lake David with, I believe, so right now, we have kind of a low little slope, and people can get up and, what exactly, is there going to be what are those plants? Are they a low-growing plant? Do they have some height to them? And I look at when Ann's Angels are down there with the ski team and things like that. What's the accessibility of the shoreline? Just a crazy, curious question.
So Amanda Boone on my team, if she wants to come up and talk about this, she can. But this is a concept plan. So this is something that was incorporated into the bid package. So there's probably going to be some questions about it, but there was a schematic in the set of drawings. I just didn't have it on the screen. So it kind of shows what that looks like, but she can better explain that.
When it comes to the plant selection, there are options of varying heights for these different plants. Some are flowering, some are not. One of the things that was really observed was a lot of that shoreline is planted with what I would call a turf grass. And it's doing
Excuse me, could you state your name and for the record?
I apologize. Amanda Boone with Woodard and Curran. What I witnessed was that turf grass is not doing much for erosion control. I actually happened to be there when one of your skiing events was taking place and saw that wave action really beating the shoreline. So there's opportunity there to use aquatic vegetation to stabilize that shoreline and also provide some water quality benefits because they uptake nutrients. The selection does need to consider the other uses, and I think there's a way to still provide the access that's needed for the activities on the lake without it compromising the shoreline from an erosion standpoint, because that will be a long-term expense for the city as well.
Thank you. I'm done.
Mr. Redzick?
I have a lot of comments, a couple of questions. First off, this is probably at least 15 years in the making, and it keeps on getting, meaning stormwater, keeps on getting kicked down the road because of funding. So with that said, a dedicated funding source is important. Two, I think we should be taking the 1.2 million that's in for stormwater into its own fund. That way it's a little bit more transparent and basically shows, you know, where the monies are going to. Is it 1.2 million that I saw earlier?
The irony of that number is that's your streets/stormwater fund,
Yeah,
and it's
okay.
all going to streets and sidewalks.
Okay, well, it still should be segregated, make it a lot easier for the council to understand, you know, what's going on with that monies. Anything stormwater related definitely should be funded in the CRA by developers. No money whatsoever should be coming out of any resident's pocket or any business's pocket, because anything that's going on has been the result of development. And not to basically put it onto a developer is irresponsible for us. There's no way, with water rates going up and, you know, fire assessment fees, there's no way that I would be able, regardless of where I'm at, to consciously support any money coming out of taxpayers' pockets. The houses, for instance, behind ACE, they've been complaining for years that the development of ACE has basically resulted in a lot of flooding in their neighborhood. I've heard that throughout, and I don't think that's ever really been addressed, and a lot of it has to do with, you know, pervious and impervious ratios. Speaking of that, in my subdivision, and I'm sure others, people are altering the areas between the houses with pavers and everything else that, again, is affecting in subdivisions pervious and impervious ratios. That needs to be enforced, but we only have one code enforcement. So when I'm no longer on the board, I'll volunteer. Yeah, okay. With that said, other issues that I've seen, again, this is in neighborhoods, grass getting into the system, that's against St. Johns River management. I don't know if people realize that, but anything grass-wise has got fertilizers and everything else, and it's getting into the systems. And this is a city supposed to be of natural charm. Our lakes need to be clean. They need to be upgraded. So with all that said, the biggest thing is, and the number one thing, even though we don't have a complete plan in front of us, we need to establish a funding source. It needs to be, again, the grant monies that you're all going for, but it definitely needs to be pushing off any of the stormwater on developers. That's all that I got to say.
Thank you. Amy Jo? Oh, I'm sorry. Matthew?
I just want to thank you for the presentation. It's very comprehensive, and I do think stormwater tends to be one of those things that nobody really pays attention to it until it fails, and when it fails, it can fail spectacularly. So I know the area somewhat, and the downtown area specifically, the older part of towns, was never built to great standards in the first place, even for the stormwater that is there. I remember an instance when I was on council 20 years ago where they were trying to clean some of the old stormwater pipes, which were old clay pipes, with a vacuum truck, and imploded a bunch of the piping. So it definitely needs upgrading where it can be upgraded. My question, though, as the CRA, though, we already have something in the budget for the Cherry Street and Lake Street stormwater improvements. Is there a prioritized list that the CRA should be considering above and beyond this project with the limited funds that we have to consider? Or is this just a general information presentation?
This is more general at the moment, and that's really what Tim and I have been working on between our two departments, is to be able to establish what is the CRA's role. That's part of tonight's presentation, is baby stepping everyone into that, And then, right now, we've identified Lake Avenue, the Cherry Lake, as a low-hanging fruit item that we can use some existing state grant funds to complement. And we've already identified a very little-known street just down 50 West, Garden Avenue. It's a little dead end, but we have there off of Mount Pleasant Road and Varnado, an area in there historically that seems, looking at aerials, to be subject to a lot of illegal filling of properties, including a pond that was filled in years ago. And so we've got pocket flooding in that area. It is in the CRA, and that's one of the areas that we would definitely want to come back and present to the CRA about the needs while we're moving from planning eventually into engineering.
I think Wendell Avenue is in there, that area too.
Which one?
Wendell Avenue, I
Yes.
think. I've been to council meetings where the residents have come complaining about standing water in the streets, basically, in the past. But, so as far as dedicated funding sources, is that something the CRA can provide? Or, because everything that we do is kind of budgeted from the tax dollars that we get in, correct? So that's not something that we as the CRA would particularly handle.
Really, where we're at the moment is the city currently is relying on what little general fund money may be available. If it's in the CRA, it would be a logical request to come and engage the CRA of could we use CRA funds to design and then build. And then beyond that, as far as the work that has been ongoing behind the scenes of how you could fund a dedicated program, it's all about an enterprise fund, and that can be funded in a few different ways, and I don't want to jump too far into that tonight, but it's not an endless list of options. You've got certain fiscal policy decisions that the council could make, the CRA could make, but it really comes down to general fund, possibly CRA or enterprise fund, or special assessment. That's a whole other area.
But having funds allocated to projects does help our application for grants and things like that, because this is that we have community buy-in to those projects and probably pumps us up the list a little higher for consideration.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
All right, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Joe?
So most of my questions have already been answered, so I'm going to kind of try to keep it a little bit short. Most of them had to do with funding sources, which you also said you didn't want to get too deep into, so we'll talk about it later. Every time this comes up, it just feels to me like this is just something that's been neglected for so long. It's basic infrastructure, and it feels like we consistently focus on wants over needs. Needs aren't always glamorous, but it's something that needs to be done, so.
Appreciate that comment. And really, as we look at historic Groveland, bear in mind that footprint had about 4,000 of your 26,000 residents in that. So it's older Groveland. It's not impossible. You just have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. And we don't have the benefit of being able to walk into our downtown and go, let's do that one big project and solve everything. We literally have the Eastern Continental Divide between the Gulf of Mexico, it's the Gulf of America now, and the Atlantic Ocean runs right here through downtown Groveland. So automatically you've got subbasins that force you to have to look at not one big facility, but several smaller facilities.
Small ones. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think, just to add to that, I think State Route 50 realignment is really, it's kind of a catalyst for downtown redevelopment, where when we start to do stormwater by itself and we go in and rip up streets to put in pipes, it's very expensive for stormwater projects. If we can couple those with transportation-related projects and other streetscape and community redevelopment activities, and we can attach some of that to the developer's need for that parcel, then it becomes more cost feasible to do stormwater in more places, I guess, so.
Is it possible to switch, instead of collecting like stormwater impact fees from a developer, to have them do the project?
It's always an option.
Yeah, well, we do that with water sewer reclaim, so we'll,
Right.
They'll pay to extend the force main out in the street, and they may recoup some of their impact fees, but the city's not putting out the capital for that.
Right.
It's essentially financed as part of their development,
All right.
so. We can look at stormwater the same way, and I know I knew this was gonna come up, and I said to TJ, I said, we can drown everybody in slides on financial assessments and the stormwater fee study that was done if you have another 4 hours. But it is, we did put a lot of thought into it, and we've met with the mayor and others at different times to talk about it. And so it's more of the timing of when it was appropriate, and we really do feel like now the timing is kind of sweet to advance this program and have that discussion. But it's a pretty involved discussion, and it involves the CRA, it involves, other, council and everybody else too. So we're trying not to kick the can, but we are in a good position to answer those questions coming up.
Thank you.
There's a song, and the words are, I'm looking for a miracle, I expect the impossible. And that's how I feel when I ask for the council to be given presentations earlier so that we can take a review of them, because we get this flashed in front of our faces. And I'm probably not as quick as some, but when we get these flashed in front of our faces, it doesn't give me personally time to process this. I've asked this over and over and over again. That's why I say I'm looking for a miracle and I'm expecting the impossible. I don't know what it would take for us as the council to get these presentations so that we have time to process them and to look at them. A question for you is, early on there was a chart, and the chart talked about the unknown ownership of 635 manholes, and they are unknown. Can you flip back to that chart? It's early on.
Yeah, but I'm going to have to do it for each one.
While you're going back there, I really wish that you all would respect the council in the manner of getting the information to us in a timely manner so that we may have other questions. And when we get it, then we have time to process and be ye ever so ready when we come to the meetings. It's a table or chart.
Yeah, no, let's go.
The manholes, the drain manholes.
Yeah.
Okay. The city owns, or it looks like 138. My question is, what is the unknown ownership? And can you explain to me why or how that is?
So what we did is as part of that initial study, we looked at all the existing mapped assets. So some of them clearly fall within subdivisions that have a defined responsibility for the stormwater system. So there's only a couple community development districts that have been established, correct? 2, I think. Which those are very explicit, they're recent, they define who's responsible for each utility, and stormwater is defined. So we can easily sort those assets and those manholes into that category of, that's an HOA, or that's that community CDD. The HOAs are fairly clear on some of that, but not all. And so then we also have parcels where the ownership is not very clear in terms of the asset, where you have an easement for some parts of these, like where the detention basin is on a separate parcel within the subdivision, and it's not clear as to who really owns that, whether the HOA, if they're even established, owns that. So we kind of put that, if there's a defunct or non-existent HOA, we put that in the unknown ownership category. So it's probably not a city asset, but we weren't quite sure. So there needs to be kind of more record research and more defined mapping, probably looking at the parcels, et cetera. It's just another level of assessment that hasn't been done yet.
Thank you. The next question, or my last question, it's just really an observation. Just curious, TJ, when did Paola, I see that she's the executive assistant, how long ago did that happen?
When she was hired 3 years ago.
Okay.
That's been her title since she was hired.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just a few. Cherry Lake Landing slide that you put up, was that a design issue, or, and if so, do we have somebody that approves those designs where the hurricane wiped out the, there you go. Was that a design issue, or what was the issue there that caused that?
The city helped facilitate communications with the engineer of record, and that engineer was June Engineering from Winter Garden, and that design precedes me, but we were able to reach out to them legally as engineer of record and ask them in a friendly way, would you please assist in the deficiencies that we've identified that had resulted in what you see on the screen. They have been actively working with Cherry Lake Landing and with, the city facilitating to identify some deficiencies that they have been in the process of correcting. I know there is still some pending information I've got to review as to the efficacy of what they've now put in motion, because we want to make sure as a city that if we have the ability to pull in the engineer of record, we're going to do that from a legal standpoint.
So where I'm going with this, TJ, is so we are in this One Water project thing. So now we're in it. Do we have somebody that has to be on staff in order to coordinate and make sure these designs are correct at the beginning? What is that labor? Is there more labor that's going to be an issue? Do we have to bring in other engineers, or?
We are very reliant on our consulting teams to be able to review whether it's utility issues or stormwater issues when new development's proposed. We are reliant, we don't have the in-house staff or expertise to get into engineering, so we use consultants to do that work, and it is extensive.
Yeah.
Could I just add to that? So these larger developments that trigger apartment with St. John's, they're required to get an ERP, environmental resource permit. So that gets reviewed for stormwater requirements, design requirements. So there's kind of that initial permit review by St. John's. The city also has a peer review team that looks at this too. Sometimes it's the city engineer, depending on the complexity of the project, and Woodard & Curran also does some of that as well. So that it does get reviewed, and those fees are collected for stormwater review, so the developer pays for that review up front.
Okay.
But when we get into issues like this, it's a different story, and that's where,
After the fact.
yeah.
Okay. The mapping issue, what has held that up? It looked like we've had funding for quite a while from the grant, and I saw the second one, I think, was $300,000. Why are we so far behind on the mapping issue?
The way the grant was awarded, we've got to go through the different phases of what we stated we would do, and really the work that was done about the Stormwater Advisory Committee. Is there a need? Should we be looking at the funding and all the, that really took up a substantial amount of that early time in the grant. It's just until this year that we've gotten to a point where we're ready to go ahead and finish the technical side of it, because that was a huge component. It was really killing two birds with one stone. We know we have physical needs, but we also knew we had some policy needs that include meeting the statute. Do you have a stormwater need clearly identified? Yes, we do. It's all over our CRA. And then what steps can we take? And that goes back to the funding policy. And that was the dominant issue for the first 2 years.
Excuse me, so what's the timeline, TJ? Because I think you said the summer's over next week. So what is the timeline to get that done?
End of October.
What's that?
End of October.
End of
the mapping
October.
will be done. And the other thing that just to build on what TJ said, so the LPA grant didn't include mapping as a scope item, so we had to modify the scope of work with DEP to include mapping. So they had it's kind of a vaguely defined pre-design study. Until we got into it, we realized, well, there's not a lot of mapping, and we can't design much to make an improvement without mapping as well as design. So it kind of built upon each step. And once we did the pre-design study, we went back to DEP and asked them to modify the scope of work and cut out mapping as its own task.
Okay, this, I'm going to get to a place where I'm going to ask you, is there phases of this that have to be done? Does this have to be done in phases, or can it be done in phases rather than all at once? As we're getting towards the bypass for Highway 50, and once that bypass goes through, what should we be ready to do, right? and it's downtown, I'm sure, because we're taking, and I'm not familiar, maybe you can enlighten me on, will we have to dig up roads? Will we have, what's the mass casualty or collateral damage, I guess you would say, to get that done? And where I'm going with this is, do we need a plan on what's going in downtown before we can do the storm water, or the storm water can be done just in general?
Well, so one of the things we're doing with, once the mapping is complete, is we're going to evaluate and do a hydraulic model for the downtown stormwater. So we're going to look at, well, how much can we manage at these other locations? So where we have, crossings with DOT right away, we can kind of back into it and see, okay, what's the capacity of that system? We got to get it over there via gravity, so we can tie into the DOT system and hopefully, utilize that as well. Or we might look at upsizing that. So there is some consideration for those primary corridors where we'd want to cross that and possibly leverage that system capacity. So that's the first part of what we'll look at. We have the DOT stormwater design, we have their stormwater model, so we can incorporate that into the assessment we're doing shortly.
Will we be digging up the streets downtown?
So I would be very hesitant after $3 million of investment on Orange Street to come in immediately and rip anything out. But what we can do over time is we need to evaluate the stormwater system that the city would be accepting as part of accepting Orange and Broad, determine any deficiencies, anything that we may need to do to improve that. And then what can we do to complement it? Because we've got all these side streets, we've got alleyways, we've got an alleyway that didn't used to be paved and now it is, and we had a flooding issue, probably attributed to that paving. So those are kind of analyses that we're currently doing. And again, having 4 subbasins in our downtown, we're having to kind of separate out, okay, what could be the potential fix for each of them? Because each of them are unique, like the Southeast Basin. What if Cortese Court over here redeveloped, the city-owned property? Well, to be really effective as a redevelopment project, we don't want stormwater to be on that site, so where's the stormwater going? And you've got the middle school with their own stormwater issues sitting right there. So we're already looking across 33 over toward Gadsden Street, for example. Or we're looking at what can we do along Sampy Road, where it's a lot of flood zones, so we're Lake Catherine Lane. So we're already looking at the overall district of downtown and how those subbasins work, but we're not quite that deep until this inventory is complete on jumping into real engineering. And to get to your point, we can have some level of plan and maybe even suggest designing and building something, but it really needs to be connected to what the redevelopment plan is, clearly. Yes.
Okay. If FDOT is putting in this bypass, and that's going to have an impact on where water goes, right? How much of the responsibility for downtown will be on them because of the bypass? Are we able to ask them for help downtown? Because that bypass will change the whole way water goes, won't it?
And that's why I brought up earlier, we engaged, for the last several years, we've engaged DOT on that. And the optimism originally was, could we do a shared use facility with either Pond A or Pond B or both? That optimism faded this past year because they made it very clear. Pond B on the east side, it is just accommodating the new State Road 50 alignment. It's not doing anything to help off-site of State Road 50, the actual city needs. And that's going to be completely on the city to guide our own destiny.
Is there logical phases that we can go to? I mean, is this something that we can be working on now and getting things ready, or
Yeah,
like
so we don't
ponds
necessarily have to wait until the DOT work is completed. So what we want to do is identify those critical, intersections of where we can utilize the infrastructure, and we can hopefully design it to a point where we then tie in later. So we're trying to maximize as much capacity as we can access at that point to get it off-site. And then we're going to focus on, well, what do we do internally within the downtown area to solve the rest of the problem? And what design event can we accommodate? Is it a 25-year storm? What are we doing about larger events? How is that managed? But I think when it comes to redevelopment within the downtown, it's going to be, we'd like to phase it with other work. So other utility work that's happening or other roadway improvements. Try to avoid areas that have been paved recently. So we try to consider that in the phasing approach. But to answer your initial question, I think you're looking at, well, we don't want to have to come in and rip something up later when it's critical to connect that through the DOT crossing essentially, right? So
But
that's
I'm
the stuff
asking-
we'll hopefully identify early on.
Let me just clarify. I'm asking because we have areas that are of real need right now. I mean, you take Crittenden and 19, where we always got the hole with that hydraulic pressure. Right behind Billy's Market, it washes out every summer, right? And we can identify, we lost 2 tenants over here because now that we raised the roads, the water goes in the back door of the, pizza place or the gun shop. So what about, and that's why I'm asking, is there phases that we can prioritize? And I don't know that we want to wait for 4 or 5 years. Is there something that we can do that will not have to be dug up again? Or, something that we can do now that can help alleviate some of these issues?
So there's a couple of scenarios that we're going to evaluate in the model. So once the mapping is complete, we're going to look at existing conditions, existing problem areas, and then we're going to look at future build-out conditions with the infill as well as the, new activation sites and the build-out within the CRA. And so the challenge with that build-out scenario is we know there's more capacity and treatment that's needed that probably can't be done on site. If you're looking at a 90% build-out on some of those lots, you can't do stormwater. You don't have space for stormwater features. You're either doing them underground or off-site. So that's the more challenging part of that. How do we accommodate future development and redevelopment? But that's one scenario. We're still going to look at existing conditions first, and if we can identify areas to alleviate existing problems, then that'll be the first phase.
Yeah, I would call it triage, really,
Yeah.
with some of these places. We talked about the strategic difference funding sources. When will we have a presentation, or when will we get an idea of what the council needs to be looking at for the different funding, whether it's bond, whether it's, assessment, whether it's, when we talk about different things, it comes back to the taxpayer, that we've been talking about so far. So when will we be able to have the scenarios presented so we'll know how we're going to deal with this?
So staff and the team, the consulting team, we're ready to take that next step. We did a presentation to council back, I believe, in February, March, and I know the mayor, you had to be out of town at that point, so we presented it, and then we met with you separately, and then this evening was really intended, let's bring some of this back in, kind of a refresher, because it's been presented at some level once to the council. But really, there's a voluminous amount of information that gets deeper into the funding and the options that the Stormwater Advisory Committee looked at, that we're prepared. And it's the end of August, so just looking at scheduling of when's the appropriate time. I mean, this is turning into a major policy decision potentially, so we want to make sure we've aligned it at the right time for it to work for the council as well.
I don't want to put a lot of pressure on, but I think this should be one of the things we're talking when we go up to the legislative session, right? And that's coming in October. This year's, your first plan is coming in October. It seems like we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on some of this stuff, so.
Well, so when we say plan, the downtown stormwater plan, we don't necessarily need that to have a discussion around funding policies and funding approach. So we have a preliminary study that was done and considered a conceptual stormwater program, and we made an assumption for capital investment, and we said, well, we're going to fund, roughly $10 million over the next 10 years, and we're going to finance it at this rate, and so here's the debt service that would need to be accommodated in the capital plan for the stormwater utility, on top of operational needs. So we estimate those things so that we come up with a potential budget, and then we can look at kind of sensitivity scenarios on that budget level of service, and we did that for 3 different levels of service. So we don't necessarily need to have a final plan to advance that conversation.
Okay, that's real good information. Do you have that now, that assumption, or will you have that when?
All that information's in the pre-design study that we did last year.
And is that the 30 million? What is that? Because I've been told it's 30 million for down here.
We actually used a number of about 10 million.
For the whole downtown?
That's a planning number. You got to get deeper into engineering before you lock that in, but yeah.
It was a placeholder, preliminary estimate, but when we look at the stormwater utility, the capital portion, excuse me, is about 25 to 30% of the overall budget because you got a lot of O&M, labor, et cetera. So when we look at the whole program, capital is a piece of that, and we can decide, kind of play with that number a little bit. But we took those preliminary assumptions and estimates, and we advanced it into, a funding scenario or scenarios where we looked at how does it, pan out when we look at the different policy decisions. So like all that information is documented in that study, and we could advance that. It's a lot to digest. It took multiple meetings, 6 meetings with the ad hoc committee to develop those recommendations. So.
And I don't want to miss the opportunity to reinforce that a lot of what Tim and his team and I and the team have been discussing is we're also, through the CRA, looking at the future of Orange and Broad and the side streets. And so when DOT does its project, you mentioned Billy's Meat Market. One of the things that we noted in their design is there'll be a 14-foot wide trail, coast-to-coast trail, adjacent to the building that Billy's Meat Market is in. That trail and what DOT has to do to improve the stormwater around it, that's going to help a lot in that one area. But if we're going to talk about converting our streets possibly to two-way, then you're also not just dealing with Orange and Broad, you're dealing with every side street. And you're opening up the need to, okay, what are we doing with stormwater while we're doing this? Because if it turns into a Broad Street streetscape project, well, the aesthetics are very important. We want the landscaping and the lighting and all that to be great, but the parking, the sidewalk widths, and the stormwater and utilities underneath, all of that is part of this effort. So I just wanted to make sure we ended on that note
You need a plan, is what you're saying.
Correct,
You need a plan.
correct.
Okay. Mr. Radzik?
Yeah. So, Mr. Mayor, let me suggest, if I can, that we, as a CRA board, agree that Beverly, Mount Pleasant, Billy's, and Crittenden are the 4 needs in the downtown, in the CRA area. And with that said, let's basically direct the staff to get us funding and how much it's going to cost from design through construction so that we know what type of monies we need to come up with, maybe from the CRA perspective. But to wait for a State Road 50 to be moved and some of these other things, let's get an existing dollars and cents and then maybe try to find some funding sources. And I would do that through maybe a direction.
Why don't you ask for a consensus on that?
I'm going to ask for a consensus that we get a dollars and cents cost from design through CA for those 4 areas, unless anyone has any other areas that they think is more important, but these have been constantly identified: Beverly, Mount Pleasant, Billy's, and Crittenden.
Dan, do you have another one?
So I definitely would agree that that needs to be done. And what you're talking about, Mayor Keogh, I think triage does need to be addressed. I think if you look at a property like where Chef It Up was, if you look at the gun shop, if you look at back alleys, stuff like that, like if you want to curb disinvestment from downtown, I don't think you can do that with a 5-year plan, because at that point it feels a little too late and a little bit longer to recover from that. So I 100% agree with that. I agree that that needs to be identified. I think that the only way that we're going to understand where those priorities are is if we reached out to the community itself. So I don't know what mode you would do that, but there's a lot of local businesses downtown that suffer from stormwater issues, and I think we would identify areas that we might not even know about if somebody doesn't feel like they have the platform to speak up. So agreed. I definitely agree with Councilwoman Gaines in the sense that we need that data. I know Mayor Keogh, you said the same thing. I understand you guys don't want to bombard us with a lot of stuff in a meeting, but we do need to have that information as far ahead as possible. I am a data person. I can comb through a lot, sitting at home and just sitting on my couch reading through data. I'm down to do that. I'm down to understand that. I think that if you speak to one council member or you speak to one board member, we all need to understand what those conversations are so that we can make the right decision. So, yes, but with the caveat that we get more feedback from the community.
Right? On the consensus.
Oh, I agree to the consensus, and I agree with Dan adding in ask for some feedback, if we can add that to your consensus, Mike. Thank you.
I'm in favor of doing this as well. My only question is, since the State Road 50 project will be addressing the Billy's Meat Market area, whether that should be as high a priority as these other areas, which are not likely to get any attention from any other source. So I would be very much in favor of the Garden Avenue, Mount Pleasant area and the Parkwood, Gadsden Street area. Those are both very low-lying areas, and they've been neglected a long time.
Yep. Amy Jo?
I'm in favor of the consensus. I agree with Dan. We need to reach out to the business owners and community and find out if there's any other areas that maybe we're not as aware of.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor.
And we asked them to bring it back in time for the November 24th meeting. Shouldn't be, is that difficult to come up with the cost before the 24th?
Let you commit to that.
November?
No, these are
Try for
fairly small
October?
projects, so I think that's reasonable.
Hey, how about October 27th?
No pressure.
I probably won't be at that meeting.
Amanda doesn't know what she's committing to. I think we're looking for a preliminary cost estimate so you guys can prioritize it and look at funding opportunities, right?
Be careful, otherwise I'm going to go to September 29th.
Well, it depends on what you're asking for. But you guys you're trying to get this is a planning level cost estimate, right? So I mean, these project areas, I mean, these have been identified. They're in the CRA watershed study. I mean, in some cases, I think these are like I think it's maybe Parkwood and Gadsden. Those are really restricted culverts, so it's probably a culvert replacement project. And these are not, we're not going to do any design. We're going to have a pretty rough estimate, and there's going to be a chunky contingency in there. Until we advance that to design, that's kind of how it is. But I think we can probably meet October.
Just understand that the CRA needs to have some sort of dollars so we know how to commit it when it comes to the budget, which we're going to be going over next. And one of the things very well may be one pot of money for stormwater, and it gets divvied up as needed. But without having that number, it doesn't really help us. So that's why, I mean, we should have had the information before tonight's budget presentation. So.
Understood. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just one word of, certainly understand the areas that you know to be an issue. Caution on identifying a project prematurely. So he talked about we're going to do the mapping and you're going to do some hydraulic modeling. One of the things I always like to caution people of is careful about solving a stormwater problem over here, even if you think you might know what the solution is, without looking at least with a model to make sure you don't move the problem. Because you can solve stormwater over here and then make it much worse over here, unintended consequence. So it does make a lot of sense sometimes to just, one sec, let us look how that looks in the model to make sure it doesn't make someone else's problem worse, because you don't want to move it, you want to solve it.
I don't think any of us said that we wanted to design it. I think we said that we just want it fixed, so there we go.
Understood.
Okay, Ed, what do
our
you need
best.
from us? What do you need from us, TJ?
Actually, I think you've given staff good direction. We've got a goal to come back in 60 days with some additional information at the planning level. We've heard what your concerns are, which is very helpful to us, so we appreciate the feedback. And we are definitely pending additional time in front of the city council on the Stormwater Advisory Committee work.
And I would just add, I mean, we're going to come up with a consensus on how far ahead we need this so that we can kind of codify it a little bit. But what really helps on stuff like this is maybe what Tim does, where we have complex things and he brings each council member in so that we can ask a lot of questions and get it out of the way, and then we don't have to take an hour and a half, but we get everything solved, and then you have a better idea of what the presentation needs to entail, too.
We will take that feedback to heart. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have the consent agenda. Sierra, could you read the consent agenda?
Yes, sir. Consent agenda. May 27th, 2025, CRA Governing Board meeting minutes. The June 27th, 2025, CRA Governing Board budget workshop minutes.
Your Honor, I move that we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion from the public? Seeing none, can we take the roll?
Board Member Baumann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Carroll?
Aye.
Board Member Fike?
Aye.
Board Member Corsi?
Aye.
Board Member Radzic? Vice Chair Gaines?
Aye.
And Chair Keo.
Aye. Moving on, there's no old business for this evening. Agenda item 1, consideration of approval resolution 2025-56, approving FY 2025-2026 Community Redevelopment Agency CRA budget. Ms. Allman, would you like to come up and lead us?
See, I should have gone up there. Good evening. Okay. So we're going to start out, and the Community Redevelopment Agency Fund accounts for special incremental ad valorem tax levies and expenditures for the rehabilitation, conservation, and/or redevelopment of the community redevelopment area in compliance with Florida statute. So what I have here is that your original CRA taxable values, so the base year that the original CRA was started was $32 million. For FY '25, it was $145 million, and for FY '26, it's $167 million. For the expanded CRA, your base year was $32 million. Your FY '20, and I apologize, that wasn't changed. It should say FY '25 was $49 million, and FY '26 was $53 million. So the budget that you have before you was based on a 5.6 millage rate for the city. The Lake County Board of County Commissioners was based on the 5.0364. The County Ambulance MSTU at the 0.4629, and the Lake County Water Authority at 0.2940. So when we look at the revenues based on a 5.6 millage rate, right now we are at a 5.5. So FY '25 for the amended budget, we currently sit at $1,383,700. The proposed for FY '26 at the 5.6 is 1.6 million, almost 1.7 million. You're looking at and what I will say about that, you'll notice the asterisk there, and it says that the millage rate vote for both the city and the county will occur on September 15th and September 23rd, respectively. Any variations in those millage rates after adoption will be adjusted in the downtown infrastructure project line item that we have within here. So when you're looking at this, your increment taxes increased due to a $26 million increase in taxable values, and your carry forward decreased due to projects that were completed in FY '25. For your expenditures, you'll look and you'll have a $22K increase in administrative expenses due to the addition of a code compliance officer part-time located within the CRA boundaries, and then also the raises and benefit premium increases for FY '26. As far as the $423K increase in program expenses is due to obviously 12% increase in revenues, and then rebudgets for projects that will not be completed by September 30 of 2025, which would be the Gadsden Trail. We have $20,000 that is going to Gadsden Trail, and then you have $734 that is going to the Lake Ave and Cherry Street. So for FY '26 budget, these are the capital projects that we are proposing. Like I just said, the $734,000 for carry forward for South Lake Ave and Cherry Street, the Gadsden Trail carry forward of $20,000, and then we created just a downtown infrastructure projects where the remainder would go of the $1.5 million, giving you proposed projects for 5.6 at $2,269,500. So an additional item to consider here, if you look in your packets that were sent out, one of the things we have under your budget is there is a $90,000 budgeted for facade projects and $48,000 for economic incentives. And so we are proposing that you put a pause on that, which would allow for more money to be allocated to the downtown infrastructure, and or you could also create another project within here that would be the downtown historic preservation, and you could split the money for that as you saw fit between the two, or putting all in one or the other. So the other thing here to consider is that September 15th is the city's final public hearing for FY 25-26 budget at 6 p.m. And then September 23rd is the county's final public hearing for 25-26 at 5:05 p.m. And with that, I will turn it over to y'all for questions, comments.
Thank you very much. We'll start on this side. Matthew, this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. In reviewing the budget and considering the presentation that we had from the very knowledgeable consultant that we have, I strongly don't feel we should include policing and code enforcement within the CRA. I really feel that is the city's purview as a whole, and I have concerns about accurately tracking, splitting employees between the city and the CRA. So my proposal would be to reallocate those departments perhaps to new capital projects for the Gadsden Street water project and the Mount Pleasant area water project. Perhaps that could help with funding studies or engineering to get those projects underway, or if there are already studies in those areas, to meet any deficiencies in those studies. That would be my opinion.
Nice, thank you. Amy Jo?
Yeah, I voiced that concern also about the splitting of employees and the proper tracking, and how the consultant said that can become very complicated. And we don't want to be non-compliant, so that may not be the best choice. That's all.
Thank you. Dan?
I obviously, I've voiced my opinion. I absolutely agree. We need co-compliance, right? That's, for the CRA, that's kind of an eyesore. There's a lot of stuff out there that one business will do and another business won't. And, it doesn't seem like a very consistent experience for the business owner and the person driving through Groveland. So absolutely need it. Now, I also agree, though, that I think that if it is something that is split, it's something that would have to be very, very, very clearly defined, and what those responsibilities are and what that follow-up looks like. I think that goes both in protecting the employee and protecting the city, and make sure that consistency is upheld, because I think that's something that a lot of times, at least in my experience, coming from a corporate background, that consistency is extremely important. It means nothing if not everybody is treated the same way. So when you have that mixed up, it can get very confusing. And I think that we should try to avoid that. So I would support it if there was something brought to the table of very specific standard operating procedures for that employee or for that shift. But it would have to be very specific. So as far as the facade grants or the small business improvement grants, I think that we got to be careful with that. I think we've seen again, I'll use that word again, disinvestment. I think we've seen that. I think if we want to attract people back into these spaces, we need to have some of that funding available. Now, I think when we talk about preservation, conservation of historic buildings, there can absolutely be some sort of split between those things. It doesn't all have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be a complete shift to historic preservation, or just keeping it all under facade grants or small business improvement. I think there can be a nice balance. So I would support some shift to the historic side of it, but not all of it. So.
Thank you. Ms. Fink?
I'm going to agree with Dan. I think that any improvement we can do to improve the attractability of our downtown is necessary. I like the facade. I agree, there might be an opportunity to take a look at where the funds shift, Dan. I agree with you on that. Maybe it's not split the way it was on the slide, but I think we can take a look at that 90,000. But we are trying to attract businesses downtown. And I think business owners are looking for that attractability. Still, I'm torn about the code enforcement. I hear what both or all three of you are saying. I'm kind of torn on that. Though, Dan, I think you made a very valid argument that it would have to be extremely well managed if it's split that way. So I'm kind of still scratching my head. I'll see what everybody else has to say on that.
Thank you.
So, in the construction industry, during actual construction, an engineer will go out and do a site visit. And they will write up the time they got on the property, what they observed, when they left the property. If we did the same thing for code enforcement, they went out to Prosperity Financial and they noticed there was too many signs in the window. They walked in at 10 o'clock. They told Mr. Bauman and whoever, we've got a code issue. They walked out at 10:30. It's documented, and then all that's compiled and brought to the CRA board for a report. And that way we would see exactly how much time and effort was being spent. Sorry for pointing you out, Matthew. You were sitting over there. And it basically would give the CRA board at least time and dollars and cents that was actually spent, and we can account for it that way. And as a matter of fact, if you didn't necessarily want to go ahead and dedicate someone for code enforcement from the CRA, the same methodology could be used to sit there and say, we had code enforcement for the city, spend an hour and a half, and then charge the CRA for that hour and a half versus a whole code enforcement person. I think that would be maybe a little bit transparent and, again, some accountability. So that's my suggestion as to how we could get around having both, not having someone dedicated, but at the same time getting code enforcement and then just back charge the CRA at the, whatever rate it costs for code enforcement. My big question to Mr. Maslow is, we have the $10 million that I'm pretty certain, well, actually, I'm not pretty certain, I'm certain we're getting back. When? And how much did the CRA, was it a 50-50 split?
It's $133,000 a year allocated in interest, and that's being retired any month now, I believe, right, Pam, April?
The 133, so what there was 133,200, I believe is what it was, that we had budgeted in interest, 133,200. It is not being funded next year. As you can see, as we don't think that we need the money from there because we did receive our first payment from FDOT as their fiscal year started in July.
And how much is the principal?
Yeah, July. Pam, do you know how much the principal is? 9.8.
And how much of that is attributable to the CRA? Not worrying about debt service, how much principal?
We didn't budget principal to,
Oh, it's a payback.
we borrowed the funds.
Okay.
We
DOT
did a
is
loan to it.
FDOT is retiring the principal.
Okay.
In
Yeah.
terms of interest being paid, and the CRA impact would be 133 that you won't have to allocate in next year's budget.
Okay, so we are getting the money back. That's already started.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I got, Mr. Mayor. I would like, again, when we get the rest of the input, to consider what I had suggested with regards to code enforcement and then,
A billing process?
yeah, sure.
Did I understand that the code enforcement person was going to be a half of one, or is it going to be a full-time?
It would,
Full-time, half paid by CRA, half by the general, but we still have room to make those decisions between now and the rest of September.
Okay, so there'll be 2 code enforcement people full-time.
There would be, yes.
Okay.
And the only main concern is just, when you pull the lever more that comes out of CRA, that means less that's coming out of your general fund. Less that comes out of your CRA, the more that's coming out of your general fund. So it's just a concern that, our council members will have to weigh that.
Okay, April, I believe I heard you talk about raises and benefits. Can you go into a little bit, not a little bit, but can you go into what that looks like, what the raises were, what that looks like?
So the raises we did across the board were a 4% increase on salaries this year that we did across the board for every employee with the exception of fire. With the exception of fire. Fire was something different because it was according to their union contract, and then, of course, the admin that was approved at the mid-year budget adjustment, the other portion of that. The medical benefits and dental benefits were probably our two largest increases that we saw from FY25 to FY26 percentage-wise. I want to say it was about a 14.8% on medical, and it was a 27% increase on dental.
Okay, Director Tim, you have two vacancies, the one where Kylie, and I don't remember the title, and the CRA manager. How will those funds be reallocated?
We still anticipate having 2 people in that spot. We have some candidates. One is internal, some are outstanding. I'm still meeting with the city manager to see how he wants to move forward with that. But my goal is by the start of the new fiscal year, after we figure out the budget, we have people in those seats. Likely at least one of those would be in-house, possibly one would be contracted out. But we'll have people in those seats with comparable pay.
Okay, but the monies right now aren't being utilized because there's no one there, correct?
Correct.
Okay, my question is, how will that money be reallocated?
So what will happen with those funds is, as you may recall, usually around November timeframe, December timeframe, we come back to the CRA and we do our first budget amendment, and we basically look at what funds we have to carry forward. And so it would basically, those funds would be looked at, and we would look at just rolling those forward, and they would be part of your first budget amendment for the CRA to roll those funds forward that was not used in this current year.
Okay, thank you.
I'll build on that just a little bit because I'm a little confused, and you can straighten me out. In 2023, 2024, on that streetscape stormwater issue, we had $611,000 budgeted. We used 0. Then we came back with 734 for 24-25. We used 0. This year we're budgeted another 734. I really have a problem with 3 years now not using those funds. One, because we've told the public we're in the budgetary process, we're going to do something with it. And 2, tying up that much money to do nothing. And so I'm wondering what is the holdup? Why? And all the way through, I found more and more of those kind of issues where we're budgeting again. It's, I guess, carryover, but it's not just 1 year; it's several years. And I'm wondering why we're budgeting it if we're not going to use it.
So with the Cherry, with the $734 or $734,000 that you're referring to, I know that there have been some project delays on that, and I'm going to kind of look at Miss Brenda back there, as that's her project, to maybe, can you give me a little bit of feedback onto what some of those delays have been? I know some of it has been eminent domain, and I don't want to speak out of turn, so I'll let Brenda answer that question.
Good evening, Brenda Toscano, Assistant to City Manager for Special Projects. Yes, that is correct. There has been some delays with CDBG. For about 1.5 years, there was some delay in getting an updated agreement from Florida Commerce. We are unsure of what happened. There was a lot of turnover within Florida Commerce. There was a lot of persistence on the city's behalf, especially mine, to get an updated agreement. And we just received that updated agreement a couple months ago with persistence and Chris Carmody involved as well, so.
Is this grant money?
No, the grant is $765,000 with the CDBG. That would be packaged with this amount coming out of the CRA, and there's also some stormwater grant funds. But the idea is, initially, this project set out to be a streetscape improvement, mostly just surface level beautification. And based on the presentation that you had before this on stormwater, we realized the best thing to do is dig once. So instead of just moving forward with beautification only and then ripping everything out and doing the stormwater, doing the utility improvements, the best approach to do is to dig once, use this as a model project to demonstrate how we can increase stormwater, utility improvements, all one time with a streetscape improvement. That had something to do with the delays in terms of getting the design right. And then also we have to go through procurement to make sure we're meeting the state regulations. And then also we have to procure everything at the same time in terms of all these improvements rather than doing it phased. That was a big reason why we had that delay. But I am firm in saying that I believe we're doing the right thing in terms of being patient and making sure that we do it all once so we're not digging up the road twice and spending a lot more money. And there is a grant extension that was provided to Brenda's point. That is a hard deadline. The wheels are in motion on the procurement side. I believe some local vendors who have been involved in this before in the past, they're waiting on the wings for that. And that is a firm deadline. We have to make sure that that project is done this year. And Mr. Mayor, to your point, in terms of showing and demonstrating to the public, giving them an idea of what we're going to be doing in the downtown, this project is going to exemplify what we'll be looking at in terms of Broad and Orange and some of those local streets to be realignment ready.
Yeah, I guess I just need to be a little more clear, and I'm sure that I'll get a reaction from this, but at some point we realize that it's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen next year, and it's not going to happen the year after that. And we tie up all this money. And while we're borrowing money for other things. And we need to make some better business decisions, I think, about just setting all this aside and not utilizing it, because I just don't think it's a good use of the public's money, and that's where I'm coming from. There's other issues in here like that I don't know if this is the place, and I apologize because usually we have a meeting before, but I just got in at midnight last night. But stuff like the category 30, which is was budgeted, and that's operating expenses in 2023-24, budgeted $213,000, used $101. In 2024, budgeted $206,000. And so far used 82. I don't know if that's a 6-month. And now we're budgeting another 200,000. And I don't understand the logic and how you build that if we're not using it year over year and we're just tie up another $100 and something thousand. I need to understand that. So, and maybe we can attack that in your first budget amendment. I don't know, but I'm just having, as I go through here, I see a lot of historic expenses that are much less than we continue to budget year over year by a lot of money. And it seems like we're just, I don't want to say padding the budget, but we're just taking that money out of circulation because we're tying it up because we think we're going to use it. Yes, sir.
I think, first off, I got those same observations, but I think that this sort of gets rectified by having that one account for everything. So that's $40,000, whatever it is. It would no longer be pigeonholed to what was there, and it would be in that one account, and it would be able to be used. Keeping in mind that this is all CRA money, it's not necessarily from Trilogy or otherwise. This is, the money that's from TIF. But I think that the underutilization of the budget gets taken care of by putting it into that one account, which then, we're not going to do that. Let's put it towards stormwater. So I think we've created a lot of flexibility.
Could you move it to a reserve?
A sinking,
then
I
pull it
don't know if you
back
could do a
out?
sinking fund.
Sinking fund, yeah, whatever the title.
You have to allocate funds in the CRA to projects that are in your plan.
But it's movable.
It's movable, yeah.
So again, you still get
It's
that one
flexible by
account,
nature of
and-
that name in that terminology, but it gives you the ability to use carry forward over several years towards larger infrastructure improvements that we know will cost a lot more than what you could allocate for that given year.
But again, to keep on budgeting $750,000 without using it, go ahead and budget it this year, and if you get, and I'm going to bring up another point in a minute, as you get towards mid-year, if it hasn't been used, then shift that money to stormwater or otherwise. So, again, speaking of money, I have not seen a CRA financial report as part of the agenda, and maybe because I didn't look at this one, but is it there, and are we getting one still?
And I apologize. It's the way you're asking the question. Let me see if I can clarify a little bit to understand what you're asking for. So is it included? Yes. So with the packet that was included in your agenda, what I gave you was the FY26. So it shows you just the FY26 with the detailed information of what they're budgeting in each of those line items, as well as a comparison, which is the 3-year comparison.
And I'm talking about monthly reporting, much like this, but with, again, $1.5 million worth of projects. Here it is, there's the budget, here's the actual for this month, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's going to be real important.
Sorry, I apologize, sir. You were talking about what is provided in the war report. So in the war report that is given, which actually it will be due the next war report, and I think that Pam just changed it. Did we just change it to where we're going to be doing it every 2 weeks with the war report, Pam, the budget? You will be getting on the CRA, so it will provide you kind of the high-level information, a 50,000-foot view, and then it will also give you more of the detail on the line items that will give you that information as well.
That's great for the recipients of the war report. I'm not sure Mr. Baumann and Mr. Corsi sees a war report, so they need to see some sort of financial, as well as the rest of the CRA board.
I hear you, and we can certainly take care of that to make sure that they are included. Does detail, like the line item detail that's provided as the first report for 26, but the comparison report does give them a little bit of an idea because it does show them what the amended budget is and what we've spent year to date as of when this report was ran.
So all due respect, with the lumping of all the projects into one bucket, getting some sort of tracking for the CRA board on a monthly basis as to where it is, that is what is going to be most important so that we can see, all right, we're not going to see that on a financial anymore with just one, if we only have the one line. So that's what I'm talking about. Mr. Maslow, I'm thinking that you may not be totally correct with the second full-time code. My understanding was it was going to be another code split, half-time for the CRA and half in the city clerk's office researching liens and so. Did that change?
That's a different position. We had a half-time personnel just conducting lien searches for code compliance. That wasn't a code compliance officer. At one point, that was in the city clerk's office many, many years ago, probably over 10 years ago or so. The idea is to move that back, increase the lien search fee from $25 to $75. With the number of lien searches that we're looking at, it's between $500 to $600, 600 different searches a year. That will offset the cost of a full-time employee in city clerk's office. That's different. That's a different position.
Sorry. I'm still not so sold on needing a full-time. We need enforcement in the CRA. I'm not sure, at 40 hours a week is what we need, to be honest. I mean, that just seems like there's going to be an awful lot of free time. So I'm still a proponent of billing the general fund.
Well,
Yeah.
I think 50/50 is probably a good place to be, and then, you know, by way of the weekly reports, looking every 2 weeks, monitoring, making sure that we're tracking calendars, making sure that we're tracking routes for code compliance. That's a way to give us an idea. Every few months, every quarter, we could look back and say, you know, are we at a good percentage, and give the board some feedback.
Again, backed up with site reports. That's always your best defense.
And if I can build on that, wasn't that what the consultant told us we needed to do when we brought this up? And there was a slippery slope, and we would have to have very, very clear
You need to have
figures,
very
almost like a
accurate
billing
records.
thing. That was her recommendation, as I remember.
was not to fund it. She recommended
Correct.
that you not fund the police and you not fund code
And
enforcement.
just bill it. Yep. I remember that, too, so.
Would making those billable hours and just having the CRA reimburse for that, would that alleviate that?
That's what I was suggesting.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's what I was saying. Would that alleviate the legal issue there, though?
I think it's whether you fund it directly out of CRA or you fund it by a reimbursement of the general fund. The key is in keeping accurate records and ensuring that the time and efforts are being spent only in the CRA by that person.
I think like the billable hours, they would only be able to bill the CRA for the hours they spent in the CRA is the idea.
Correct.
So they would have to have the documentation.
Yes.
Like a field observation
Yeah.
report.
And the police initiative, I mean, that's in your budget, I mean, it's supposed to be innovative policing. It's not just your typical walking the streets in your downtown. And I know that you do have police that come to your First Friday events or Second Friday events and try and do a lot more community outreach than just patrolling the CRA. So I think with those events, attendance at those and initiatives that are innovative and not just regular patrol duties, you can use the funds for that. But you just have to be very careful and document what are we saying is innovative policing.
So could we use the same methodology and having the PD bill the CRA for the time that they spend at a CRA event?
Yeah, but it's not just being present at the CRA events to provide security.
job.
Because that's their normal job. It's how are we using the police in innovative ways within your CRA district?
Like Ramsey giving out T-shirts to everyone walking by.
Correct.
Your Honor, if I might, since we're talking about it again, just the time and energy we're spending on having to, should we not split things? How much time and energy is a code enforcement officer going to spend on tracking things they wouldn't otherwise have to track if they were just paid for by the city? I'm not against code enforcement. I just strongly feel it belongs at the city level, along with the policing is definitely at the city level. I think they will be more efficient at their jobs if their hands aren't tied with what they're allowed to do with the time that they have. I understand this is sounding to me more like a budgetary offset for the general fund, which I can appreciate. I just don't feel this is the appropriate way to do so. So I'm not in favor of including the policing and the code enforcement in this budget. I'm not against code enforcement and policing. I strongly appreciate our police department. They do an excellent job. And we definitely need more code enforcement in town. But I don't think the CRA is the conveyance to do so.
Okay, I think to get to a place where we can get a motion, we need to take facade historic. We talked about the splitting of funds in facade historic. We need a consensus on whether we want to do that. We need a consensus on the code enforcement, in or out. We need a consensus on the police, in or out. So I'll ask for those one at a time. Is there anything I missed on those? No?
The small business grant,
What?
is that separate from the facade historical, or could we?
They're the same thing. It used to be called facade grants, but we just changed the name to small business grants.
That's more flexible.
Okay.
But I heard two numbers.
You're going to make
That's
the,
why I'm
ask
confused.
for
Yeah,
the consent?
I'll go ahead and make the motion for the, to, I guess, I would say revisit the facade and that grant and what that applies for as far as historical or not historical. I don't think that that should be pulled off. Either that's something that we talk about next year, or it's something that is revisited for
You're
this
asking
budget.
for consensus on that, right?
I'm asking for a consensus to not change that right now until we have more information. Plus, I don't think we really have a lot on here that tells us how it's been used, how it's been administered, and what the plan is going forward with that. Because I know the administrating those grants has been a challenge in some sense too. So I think we need to know what to do with that. So my motion is to not change that right now on the budget, to not remove that, because that was the staff recommendation, was to move those funds from there to something else.
It was to move it to infrastructure.
Correct. I don't think it should be moved to infrastructure.
And,
so.
okay, all right.
I'll second that.
And that's a consensus, yes?
Well, actually, Dan did say a motion, and I was going to ask for some clarity as to
Consensus.
whether it's a concession, a consensus or a motion. So if you could restate it as a consensus, I think it would be easier.
Yes, can I get a consensus to not touch that budget?
Okay.
I agree with the consensus.
Thank you.
I agree.
I think the facade portion's been reasonably successful improving the visage of downtown. I don't know about the other portion where we lent money to people to fix up, and then the businesses kind of didn't make it, and then we were out a bunch of money. I think the facade has improved the visibility of the downtown, so I'm okay with leaving that in the budget.
I'm okay with leaving it.
I'm fine with leaving.
I'm against it. I don't think that we need a facade fixed. I think we need storm drain. We have, the whole purpose was to move to infrastructure. We've been doing a lot of putting lipstick on the pig, and we haven't been doing a lot what goes underneath. And I would really hope that we reconsider that, because I think you'll see, as far as moving ahead with the whole budget as a whole in this city, that we'll be moving a lot from what we said earlier, the want to have to the needs to have, because what's under the surface needs to be improved. And I think I'm surprised. I think that what was said was some of this money could be moved towards some of the triage that we just talked about.
I thought
And-
they said that this money was being moved to historical preservation. I totally missed it.
We wanted to present you some options.
Okay.
So one option is the existing small business grants and incentives. Second option is moving all or some toward the infrastructure improvements, which are expensive projects and they're fundamental. The third option is moving all or some toward historic preservation. I'm just something to consider. You could leave it unchanged tonight, understanding you're about to vote on an advisory board. Maybe that's a good first assignment to that advisory board once they're appointed, to get their feedback in terms of how they would recommend best use of those funds, just for consideration.
Mr. Mayor, we have not been overly successful with facades, and I'm arguing it against myself now, chefing it up. They're not here anymore. The butcher block, they're still there, but they're not there anymore. But I don't know what you're meaning, and maybe you do. What is historic preservation? And why am I using CRA money for historic preservation when I can go to the state, like we are hopefully going to do with the train station? So why do I need historic preservation money out of the CRA?
It'd give you the opportunity for any businesses moving into a historic building to conduct historic preservation along with facade improvements. Could be seen as seed money for the train station if any additional funds are needed in terms of design and getting that going. In terms of restoration, could be looking at existing city-owned assets such as the Lake David Center that might need some light renovations here pretty soon. Historic preservation has come up quite a bit in terms of strategic planning committee meetings. We had probably one meeting, probably an hour allocated to that topic. I anticipate historic preservation coming to the council in some way, shape, or form as part of those recommendations. But again, it's just options that you could decide to do with.
Sounds like it's a downtown infrastructure project to me, and you just add it in there and you have a line item underneath and budget it, and then be able to move it around if it's not used.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I would just say this last thing. We're losing tenants, we're not gaining them. And it's not the facades that we're losing them. We're losing them because you can't wet vac water out of your kitchen after every rainstorm. You go down to the liquor store and ask them what happens after a rainstorm. You go over to Billy's. I mean, I go in there and shop, and I get an earful every single time. That we have to look at the need of the public first. And will it be something I can get my picture taken in front of? No, not some new facade, but it will make a difference to the public and their quality of life when they turn right on Crittenden and they don't break an axle, or you know, try to go around behind and we don't have big potholes because we have hydraulic issues. And so I would just ask for reconsideration of that.
I want to reconsider my vote and say, put it into the infrastructure projects.
I'll reconsider as well and put in infrastructure.
I think we moved $1.5 million to infrastructure the last time. So I don't see where the 90,000 is a huge thing, and we have the ability to reconsider it later.
1.5 was streets, sidewalks, and
It says
infrastructure.
downtown infrastructure. That
We
includes
just got
stormwater.
where'd it go? Somebody asked for clarification on that earlier, and it was all three rolled in.
Doesn't go as far as you'd think it goes either.
90,000 is not really gonna go, isn't gonna be able to do anything as far as stormwater goes. Doesn't even pay for design.
You could look at redoing the alleyway or whatever behind some of the shops downtown where they're having flooding issues.
I mean, we do need to focus on that first. I just think, I feel like that's one of those things that if we make it go away entirely, it'll be gone forever. I don't feel like it's gonna ever get reconsidered to come back, and I do think it's worthy to keep. So that's where I struggle, because we do need the infrastructure improvement, but at some level, we'll also need those incentives. So, I don't know. I'll stick with my vote for now, because we have the option to reconsider later.
Thank you.
I really like the, whoever suggested, I really like the idea of should we pass a CRA advisory board to give them, to let them cut their teeth on this. I think that's a good idea.
With that is, this is the CRA budget that we're talking about versus a new board, so we're kind of, I hear you. You know, we had it in place, but this is us discussing the budget.
Right, but with the infrastructure, I mean, you know, with the water, but I'll go along with whatever makes sense. Whatever that looks like, I'll go along with it if it makes sense.
I don't understand. What are you voting on? Are yes or no?
I'm just making, I wasn't voting, I was making a comment. Is it time to vote?
Yes.
Oh.
No, it's just consensus.
Kind of, it's a
So
consensus
we're
vote.
going to put it in the motion. The
What we had
consensus.
originally stated.
Decisions. I get it about the stormwater, and not having the stormwater will keep businesses out. It is true that the facades won't keep stormwater out, so I guess I'll reconsider, not guess, I will reconsider and say, let's do it.
My turn? No, sorry. I didn't know where we were on that. I would still like to hang on to, and I agree with Amy Jo, we can reconsider this. It'll give us time after tonight to kind of wrap our heads around it. So I don't think it has to be a rush to judgment to make the decision tonight, one way or the other. I'll stick with putting the money there for the facade projects, and just kind of, it kind of puts it in the parking lot, and then we can move it back forward. So it gives us time to sleep on it and then have another discussion about it.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the consensus to leave it as is. I would say that I think we need to change some of the verbiage. Facade project is a little bit of a misleading name for it, because I agree. I don't think just making something pretty is worth dealing with stormwater issues flooding the back of your shop. But I do believe that providing incentives for small businesses to come in here is just as crucial as the incentives that we've provided for large businesses to come in here. And I think if we take that away, this is not a take all, leave all. I mean, the discussion could be going from 90,000 to 60,000. Like, what was the carry forward from last year? What wasn't used last year? That could be allocated to stormwater. I don't think this is necessarily a yes or no, in my opinion, but at least for now, I think unless we have further discussion, I'm going to keep my original opinion.
Okay, and that's a 3-3, and I'll vote to move it to stormwater. We have other people that we're going to lose if we don't take care of it right now, and I'd rather keep what we've got than hope we get new down the road. So,
We still have, I don't know what we're calling it, out of the general fund, economic incentives or business development, whatever, so we still have the money. It's just that we're not going to have 90,000 in facade. Someone wants something, they go and get it through the general fund and that line item.
You have two options. In the general fund, I believe the majority, if not all, is allocated to the Kroger incentive deal. And you do have some funds set aside in the building fund. Also, another decision point there, one of the use of those funds is by using carry forward over a course of 4 years for a building replacement. That could go to a city hall replacement fund. So there's some options with the building fund. I know we're not talking about that tonight, but that could be an alternative should you decide on allocating the funds towards infrastructure in the CRA.
I believe the building fund is totally taken, right? 2.9, or we got a 3.3?
There's some funds set aside still for economic development in the building fund, but again, you have the option to reallocate all or a portion of that towards something else.
Okay. All right, moving on, we have code enforcement to move out of CRA.
Do it on a billing basis?
I want you to ask for the consensus.
Yeah, so I'd like to get a consensus to do code enforcement in the CRA on a case-by-case with documentation, field observation reports that are as detailed as needed.
Let's start this.
I'm against. I think it's too much overhead, and I don't think it's the proper place to put code enforcement.
He's moving the code enforcement to the city.
He's moving that it be basically billed to the CRA, but all of the documentation requirements are going to remain the same in order to verify that billing. And the CRA will still be paying for it. We'll still have to meet all the guidelines and the strict requirements. And per the consultant's suggestion, we should not be commingling those services. It's a dangerous thing to do, and I don't think it's a good thing for the city to get involved in. So I'm against it in the CRA pretty much in any way, shape, or form. I realize this may increase taxes. As a business owner, I appreciate our strong police department. I appreciate the work that the existing code enforcement is able to get done. I think they could use another helper in that department. I just don't believe it belongs in the CRA.
Okay. Amy Jo?
I'm in favor of the billable hours as long as our legal comes up with a way to make it legal. Sorry, Anita.
I can give lessons on billable hours and how to keep track.
Yeah, I bet you are. Yeah. Vice Mayor?
I agree with Amy Jo, but I want to say that economic development and the water treatment, you got to have both. It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? You know, and there's got to be a balance, but that's my thought on it.
So you're voting for moving it back to the general fund and then billing?
Yes.
Okay. Dan?
I would agree that I think we should concede to respect the opinion of the consultants that we pay to make the right decision in this kind of thing. And of course, we are up here to make the final decision. But the CRA exists to address blight and infuse money into the downtown area to benefit the local economy ultimately, right? I think a code enforcement is an operational role. So I think, you know, I get that we want the billable hours thing is kind of like that trade-off, that we're not saying they're not employed by the CRA, but I think that's still a little bit slippery slope in including anything billable to the CRA that's an operational role, and that is a compliance role. That's not, yes, you could look at it as, well, they're gonna hold somebody accountable if there's trash outside, but that's not addressing blight. That just shouldn't be there. So, yeah, I would say I would agree that the code enforcement should stay under general fund and not include billable hours to the CRA.
Should stay in the general fund, not.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yep, okay. Stay in the general fund, correct.
All right. Ms. Fike?
I would like it to stay in the general fund. I think it's going to be such a dichotomy trying to figure out what's going on and when it was billed, who it was billed, and I'll use the word slippery slope again. So yes, I think it should stay in the general fund.
I'm really, really lost because I don't have a problem funding it from the general fund, but if we have a code in the CRA area, they should be billing the CRA for that time with the field observation report or otherwise. So leaving it in the general fund is not an issue. Getting reimbursed on a case-by-case basis is my issue. Versus having a person full-time coming out of the CRA budget. I don't need that.
CRA is also the city, so code enforcement citywide, code enforcement handles the CRA, and you lose the overhead of having to track everything, which code enforcement is also, I believe, some kind of quasi-judicial thing. It could introduce another element of whether things were tracked properly in enforcing code enforcement. That's a legal question, but I could see that being a potential concern.
We have a 3-3, so I'm going to break the tie and make it billable. And that's because I do consulting, and it's not that hard to keep hours and stuff straight when your livelihood depends on it. I think it's pretty, with technology, it's pretty simple these days. So, so that we pass that, then we go to.
What was the final result on that?
Code enforcement, police.
4-3.
The police, that was, you, Matthew, you want to?
Same comments. I'm not in favor of it.
The police, I think, is even more questionable because it also has to have that innovative policing element. I think that becomes too complicated, so I'm going to go no on that one.
I think it should be just kept where it is.
Not in favor of funding policemen out of the CRA. Stays in the general fund.
I agree. Keep it in the general fund.
Agreed, general fund.
Agree also. So there we go. So the police comes out, because we're going to need this for a motion, right? Police comes out. Code enforcement is in the general fund with billing to the CRA. So now there's a billing. I don't know how you're going to handle that budget, but you can get creative on that. And then what was the other one? We
The
had
facade going into infrastructure.
the facade is going into infrastructure.
Where should we reallocate the police budget to?
What's that?
Shall we reallocate the police budget to infrastructure as well? Because
Budget
in
to
the budget in the
infrastructure.
CRA,
That's
they have about 40.
Oh, Matthew, that's a great idea.
What are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
But may I ask one question on clarification? Because everybody keeps saying 90,000. Realize that there's 90,000 there plus 48. So you've
I
got
said
the
it, and everybody
facade.
told me I was wrong.
138,000.
You've
Not
got
you.
the 90, no, it's okay.
You're good.
You've got the 90,000,
Not you.
and then you also have 48,000. And so I'm just asking clarification, so I know what I'm doing with this budget when we amend it. Is it just the 90,000 that is staying there? Or are we keeping the 48 there as well? Or I'm sorry, coming out, going into the downtown infrastructure, my apologies.
I was under the interpretation you were looking at the 90 plus 48 as one lump sum.
Right, and one lump sum, and to go back to what other people have said, there's always your mid-year adjustment, and you do have your new council, and maybe we haven't even voted on it yet, if it happens. So at that point, you can relook at it. But 148,000 sounds like a lot, but it's not when you're talking pavement and stuff. It's pretty.
Plus the 44.5 from the police department? Do you wish to move that to infrastructure as well?
One other thing that you need to consider is I had previously advised that the Water Authority is no longer contributing to the CRA. So there's 43,300 in revenue in your budget for 25-26, and you will not be receiving those funds from the or from the Lake County Water Authority. So they need to come out of the budget.
That would basically offset the 48,
That
roughly.
offsets
At this year's change?
does that offset the police officer?
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much for that.
We have to double check.
Budget buster.
All right, so now we need a motion to accept the budget as amended.
I'll make a motion to accept the budget as amended.
Have a
Do we need
motion?
to
A second.
itemize that?
We have a second. Any further discussion? Any public discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and take the roll.
Board Member Razick, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice Chair Gaines?
Aye.
Board Member Corsi?
Nay.
Board Member Bauman?
Nay.
Board Member Carroll?
Nay.
Board Member Fike?
Nay.
And Chair Keough.
Aye.
Have,
So we have a no
if
no
failed.
budget.
Yeah.
I would make a motion to accept the budget, moving the facade money to infrastructure, moving both the code enforcement and the police department lines to infrastructure. Was there a third item that we were considering? Or that's everything, right?
I think that was it. We said as amended, so.
Well, I'm making a new motion, so it's basically the same thing we were doing, except moving code enforcement completely out of the CRA. That's my motion.
I can't hear you. Say that again with the,
I'm moving what we were before, except that we will not be reimbursing code enforcement out of the CRA.
We won't be billing.
Correct.
We won't be billing the CRA.
so there's no, okay, I'm fine with that.
I think he's saying no reimbursement of code enforcement.
A reimbursement from the CRA for code enforcement.
Moving code enforcement completely out of the CRA budget, moving police completely out of the CRA budget, and moving everything to infrastructure.
Correct. That's my motion.
Vote that we just had.
It was voted down. We have no budget. So now we have another motion to the same thing with a change of no reimbursement for, no reimbursement for the code enforcement, and we can discuss that. We have a motion, we need a second, and then we can discuss.
I've made a motion. I don't know if anybody seconded it yet. I made the motion, but I don't think anyone seconded it yet.
Yeah. Do we have a second? Seeing no second, would you like to restate the motion, or do we have another motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and second the motion because I got a couple of comments, and if we don't second it, we can't discuss it. So I'm going to go ahead and second it for that. No.
No, you don't.
Only he has to.
Just the first. Whoever made the motion has to vote in favor of the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So we'll open it up for discussion. We'll start with you, Mr. Redson.
That okay? All right. So, out of left field, Mr. Rossi Carver tells us that we don't get $48,000 from the Water Authority anymore. So now that kind of sort of mitigates billing the CRA since we have $48,000 less in revenues. so I can stomach not billing the CRA based on that financial change.
Okay.
How much is the
I
police
do
officer
use the word
budget?
stomach.
44?
5-7. Council member.
Okay. Dan, comment, discussion? Ms. Fike? Joe?
No, I just, looking at all the numbers. So that offsets that.
Well, the lack of money do make a difference. You know, the 40-some thousand, that has an impact.
It is over there stealing, just, oh, you don't have that, JK.
Okay, seeing no further comment, public discussion? Seeing none, go ahead and take the vote.
Board Member Baumann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Razick?
Reluctantly, aye.
Board Member Carroll?
Aye.
Board Member Fike?
Aye.
Board Member Corsi?
Nay.
Vice Chair Gaines?
Aye.
And Chair Keo?
Nay. So carries. You have a budget. Moving on, next new business, agenda item 2, consideration of approval to move forward to City Council Ordinance 2025-22, Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board Establishment. Mr. Maslow?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we actually have Mr. John Jones joining us after a long hiatus, and happy to have him back. His first assignment back was actually looking at this advisory board. I believe this is his first assignment, and putting together an ordinance for us. I reviewed that with Anita and the city manager. We've made some tweaks, but I'm going to let John Jones present the background and bringing it home and hopefully having a vote and approval tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Maslow. Mayor Keough, ladies and gentlemen of the CRA Governing Board, my name is John Jones, GAI Consultant, 615 East South Street, Orlando, Florida. At the January 27th CRA Board meeting, staff was directed to move forward establishing a 7-member CRA Advisory Board with 4-year terms. Tonight, we're here to consider advancing Ordinance 2025-22 to establish the CRA Advisory Board and advance that ordinance to the City Council, make a recommendation to advance it to City Council. The high points of the ordinance include a 7-member appointed advisory board appointed by the CRA Governing Board. It would be for a 4-year term. 3 members would be serving 2-year terms. That would be staggered at the first group of members. A chair and vice chair of the advisory board would be elected by the advisory board themselves, each to 1-year terms, and those terms could also be extended or renewed. Let's see. They would meet every other month or as needed, as directed by the CRA Governing Board. Tonight, we're here once again to reach consensus to advance the ordinance to the City Council. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. It's pretty straightforward.
Thank you. Mr. Corsi, do you have any questions?
I guess clarification, so is this something that would be similar to the Planning and Zoning Board where you have the 7 members?
Yes, sir.
They advise just council, so you lose Matthew and I as the governing board.
That is yet to be determined by the City Council, but that is, I would yield that discussion to Mr. Maslow. I think that is something that is in the works.
Yeah, the idea is that council would essentially serve as the CRA Governing Board with the ex officio member representative from the county. Mr. Corsi, Mr. Baumann, their positions would move to the first 2 initial at-large positions with the CRA Advisory Board, giving the council serving as the CRA Governing Board each of you would be able to appoint one member, so that would be 5 plus 2, and giving you a 7-board advisory board. The one caveat is there would have to be an additional ordinance coming concurrently with this ordinance to City Council, and that would be amending the CRA governing board from the 7 members plus ex officio down to 5 members. Did I get that right? Thank you.
And the 5 members that we would appoint still has to come from the CRA area.
We have a little bit of opening there.
Yeah,
John, do you want to read the language? Or?
Sure. The ordinance allows for members to either reside within the CRA area or have a business in the CRA area. And there would also be preference given to various professional traits or skills, whether they're engineers, landscape architects, environmental scientists, or economic developers and or realtors would be given preferential, how do you say, consideration.
No chefs in there. What?
I'm not touching that one.
And again, it does call for the county representative because that is what was predicated with the expansion of the CRA area was the county representation. So
Correct,
that's
as
still
an
in
ex
there.
officio non-voting member.
Your Honor.
I do have one more question. So I think as written, it says that special consideration can be made to members who are outside of the both CRA and the city boundary if they have a certain expertise. Is that correct?
Not only a special expertise, consideration could be given to anyone who applies. With the 163 rules regarding CRA board memberships do not apply to advisory boards.
Okay. So if special consideration can be made, then would it, I guess as written and it's saying that it needs to be people within the CRA boundary, that really just kind of cancels that out then? Because special consideration can always be special. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But if it happens all the time, then it's not special.
Yeah. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Fike?
I apologize, I missed probably your opening salvo, but you just said, and let me be clear, I'm not sure which one of you said it could be from anywhere, but are you saying outside of Groveland?
No, ma'am, I would recommend residents of the city of Groveland.
Okay, thank you. Residents of the city, incorporated or unincorporated?
The city incorporated.
Okay.
They're
Much like the P and Z board, then I take it, okay. And/or much like Dan owns a business in the city. My next question is, so with the change that we're considering, if Matthew and Dan were then on the advisory board, they lose their vote up here if we move?
Yes, ma'am. The governing board would consist solely of the city council plus the ex officio member from the county.
Okay, thank you.
I like elements of it, but I don't like the fact that anyone outside of the CRA area can serve on it. That is contradictory to everything that the CRA is all about. You know, someone from Trilogy might not have any clue, nor would they have a desire maybe to do a project that we currently would do because they don't know enough about it. I have a large problem with that. If that provision was not in there, I could go for it because, again, the council is going to be the ultimate decision makers because we have to, because we hold money. But any provision that allows for someone outside of this CRA area is contradictory to what the CRA is all about.
I understand, sir. The rules for 163 regarding the membership of the CRA board being linked solely to people that work within the CRA or live within the CRA does not apply here. And the other consideration is that sometimes it's hard to find people to serve on CRA advisory boards. So you want to open it up to as wide a pool of professionals as possible.
I understand what the law says, but that doesn't mean that I need to agree with it.
Understood, sir.
Okay, Matthew?
I'm curious where the impetus for changing the makeup of the governing board came from, because that's not something that we ever discussed here. I will point out that tonight's consensuses might have been very different without 2 additional voting members on the board. Secondly, more importantly, is we're kind of getting the cart before the horse with this ordinance because it's incumbent upon what the council intends to do. Because if the council doesn't change the governing board, this ordinance isn't going to be enforceable, or it'll have to be changed. So until the council decides what it wants to do with the governing board, I think we should table this issue until that decision has been made.
But our vote goes to the council as a recommendation. So,
Would this board be subject to sunshine laws?
Yes.
So we're going to take the 7 people who are most passionate about our downtown area and make it so they can't talk to each other. That's all. I'm good.
The flip side of having people in the CRA area only, the flip side of that, yes, you may have somebody in Trilogy, or you may have somebody in Waterside that could be just as passionate as someone in the CRA area. So I don't think that that should be poo-pooed, because people outside also have a motive for reasoning to make this city a better place. So I am glad that this will be opened up to people outside of the CRA area.
okay, my comment would be we have 5 people here that aren't in the CRA voting, and I don't think we have a problem. The 7 people, I think what we're doing is chasing the P&Z style, because what happened when we went from a similar setup as this with P&Z to a separate entity, that we were able to drill down, that group could drill down much deeper and spend much more time on specific issues than was happening before, because there just wasn't enough time for just the council to get down with all the other stuff that they had. So I am totally for following that model, and the diversity of ideas, no matter where they come from, is a strength, not a weakness. So I'm for opening it up. It will still be, the people will be approved by the council. It won't be something that's wide open. So on who goes on there. So I think we have control from that standpoint. So with that said,
Your Honor, if I might.
yes.
I'm not opposed to creating an advisory board to the CRA. I'm opposed to reducing the size of the governing board, because then you do go moving 2 voting members that are in the CRA off the board, and then the majority of the board is people not in the CRA. So I'm okay with making an advisory committee to the CRA. I'm not okay with reducing the size of the CRA governing board. And in my mind, forwarding this ordinance to council with a recommendation of approval is also approving reducing the governing board, because this ordinance is written with that in account.
Yes, and if they didn't approve it, nothing would be approved. So, but I think that we are in the court. We go first to have the advisory board, then it's up to the council to go ahead and vote on whether they want to accept that along with the
And I understand, but I asked the
change in
attorney before the meeting, and this ordinance is drafted as if the governing board were to be reduced. So if you submit this for approval, it can't be approved if you don't reduce the governing board.
Correct. Not from us, but from the council.
From the council, yes.
We can only approve this. The council has to approve the other.
I understand.
Yeah, so.
I'm just saying I'm not in favor of reducing the governing board, so I'm not in favor of this ordinance.
Okay, so that we can take that up at the council.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Matthew brings up a good point in that we have a business and/or a resident in the CRA, and they vote for it because they're in the CRA, and to take away those 2 votes and leaving it up to us does leave members who are in the CRA out of the actual approval process.
I would be disenfranchised, I can tell you that.
This worked.
Now, if there was some way of structuring the CRA to have an advisory board to the 7 of us, now I'm okay with that, because that would still do the same thing. They'd still get the 7 people from wherever they are that would then report to the CRA board, which is going to go to the city council. But I like that model.
That's what I thought we were doing.
That would give us the best of both worlds.
That's what I thought we were doing at the last discussion we had on this. I thought we were just creating a sub-board to this board, not altering this board. at the
Definitely
same
would
time.
like to see that more so.
So the way this is right now, if you made the advisory council, these 2 go to that, and we get to vote on everything twice. So ordinance is 3 times.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
And that is respecting people who are actually in the CRA area and benefit from it the most.
Yeah, but we'll still have another meeting for this group. The thing was to, okay, well, we just discussed it. I don't want to argue about it. But, I mean, I think that city council has enough. And with the I think the P&Z showed what could happen, and to have a meeting and then another meeting and then another meeting to go to the council would be 3. We'd be adding issues rather than solving them, so. But I think we're discussing right now, and the only thing we can discuss is, do we want an advisory board? Because we can't vote on the change of the, of this board. The council has to vote on that, right?
That's correct, but if, as written, if the board wants to approve it going back to what was originally proposed by this board, which was the retain your 7 members and create an advisory board of 7, then we need direction on that, and you could include that in your motion to approve. If you want to approve it as it's drafted, contemplating council's going to reduce the CRA board to 5, then you could motion to approve it as written.
And since you have 5 people here listening to it, that's going to be down the road.
You're going to have 2 new council members in 50 days. I think you should kick the can down the road a little bit, ferret this out a little bit more, and then let the new council decide. All right, I'll make a motion that we table what am I tabling? Consideration of approval to move forward ordinance 2025-22. Anita, do I need to set a date for the table?
If you want it to be after the new council is in
And I will table it
session.
until after the new council is seated.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Any public discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and call for the vote.
Board Member Razzak, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Ballman?
Aye.
Board Member Carroll?
Aye.
Board Member Fike?
Aye.
Board Member Corsi?
Aye.
Vice Chair Gaines?
Aye.
And Chair Keough.
Aye. Okay, moving on to board member reports. Let's go ahead, Dan.
I have no report.
Okay. Ms. Fike?
I have no report, but I have but I have a question. And Tim, I hate to roll back, but something Vice Mayor Gaines asked you about, was it Kylie's position? Do I have her name correctly? And you talked about the new position and be a contracted employee. And I know we've talked about contracted employees again, so bear with me on this question. They would be a 1099 employee, and we would not be paying benefits for them if they were a contracted employee, correct?
Correct.
There would be that savings to the city on the benefits, et cetera. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, I don't have a report, but I'd like us to consider moving concurrently with the train depot, meaning we've talked about a visioning committee, and we also know that the developer, and by the way, I don't know how much everyone knows about it, but it is out there. The DA is now separate and apart from the owner of the property. In other words, it's almost like it's going to be sold on a lot-by-lot basis by Finkler. So Finkler is the landowner. So when we go looking at the train station, we should be, again, in my opinion, dealing with Finkler. He's already said many times through the years that he's ready to, to deed it over. So I think that we need to do that at the same time as setting a visioning committee. And again, both could take some time, and I don't want to be wasting any time in order to go get monies from the state for grants or otherwise. So I'd like to get a consensus to move concurrently with the train depot, with getting a visioning committee, and again, getting that deed.
Currently with the downtown, or concurrently with what?
Oh, concurrent with the putting together a visioning committee, and with, yeah.
Is it for the whole downtown?
No, it's just, the train depot should be deeded over at the same time that we're looking to get a vision for the train depot. We talked about getting people to figure out what it is the train depot is going to be when it grows up. Well, I don't think we want to wait till we get that to get it deeded over. Let's do it before, during, or whatever, but let's get moving on
Just
it.
to get a visioning committee to start working on the train depot.
We definitely need that, but again, we as a council, as a CRA, need to direct, in my opinion, who are you guys? The city.
Staff.
To get that deeded over.
Yeah, there's a meeting with the city manager this week to start talking that, so I think that's already in the works. But to get the vision, to go to meetings and talk about the train station and not know what the train station is going to be when it grows up,
Yep.
doesn't give us a lot of leverage. Because they're very concerned on what it's going to be because they got stuff looking at it, right?
So what do we want to do about the visioning committee? Have we formally, we talked about it in the retreat, but it hasn't made it here yet. So do we want to codify that?
Consensus, yeah.
All right, so I'd like to get a consensus that we put together a visioning committee for the train depot.
Would that be, we put in the outline on how we're going to select it and all that stuff?
Again, that's something that I would think would be citywide, even though it's in the CRA. We can't keep on trying to go just to the CRA for all these different committees. So I would use, again, a P&Z perspective. The museum's going to want to have a seat on that board because, it's a historic place, so.
So should we have staff come back with that outline of what
Yeah,
that's
that's
going to
fine.
be by
That's fine.
at the
Yeah.
next meeting?
Yeah.
I'm happy to share an update on that right now if you'd like. Myself, Dan Corsi, Robin Hoover from P&Z, and then also Jason Brown from the Historic Preservation Society. We have two planned tours, I believe, City of Winter Park's Train Depot and then the City of Brooksville. Both have models for farmers markets, historic preservation, event center, and then also historic museums, looking at those as inspiration. I believe that's a committee that you're including someone from the CRA board, the Historic Preservation Society, and also P&Z. They're very active in terms of the downtown area, in terms of business and resident base. That could be a committee that council could consider their recommendations in terms of the vision for that property and that building.
Like that committee.
I would agree with that.
Agreed. Yes.
Good.
Yep.
Okay.
What are the hangups on having the property deeded over now? Are they just concerned that the city's not going to do anything with it? Or is, I'm sorry, I'm curious, what's the holdup with them deeding the property over? Why haven't they done it if they say they're eager to do it? Why hasn't it happened yet? Do we know?
We'll be able to answer that by next week, I think.
Okay.
Okay, board reports continue. Did I? No, yes?
I will probably not be here for the October 27th report. I'll probably be out of town visiting family. My only other, I don't really have a report, but I was curious, if there's been any development on the Avalon project, if they've done anything, or if it's just still out there.
We have a letter that has been delivered, and there's a meeting this week. We're trying to finalize it for, the last I heard was Friday, to start the dialogue on what that's going to look like.
What letter was delivered?
The letter that was delivered that we wanted to take another look at the contract.
It probably should have emanated out of the CRA, is what Matthew is saying.
For the report.
I can send a copy of that letter to the CRA board members as well.
Pretty short.
No report.
No report.
And I just have one asking for consensus of the group on how far out ahead do you want the packets that came up earlier, that we're not getting them in time? What is the time that we would like these, so we can give direction to the staff on the length of time we need on the packets of information?
You know, I understand that it can be hard to get information and get it all compiled, and then once you get it compiled, new stuff comes up. So I don't think it needs to be a month, but I think at least 2 weeks, I think is fair. It gives me enough time, so.
Mike?
I would say 2 weeks. My only concern might be there could be data that's not able, it might be down to a week. I can scrub through it in a week. I don't need a 2-week ramp up, but I would say no less than a week.
2 weeks for something that we had today. Otherwise, I don't need that much time for simple things, but for complex things, at least.
A week to 2 weeks. In case you have questions and you want to make an appointment with staff to make sure you can get in to talk to them about it if you need to before the meeting.
I'm going to go with 2 weeks in case I need an appointment with staff. My schedule doesn't have a lot of wiggle room.
I say 2 weeks. Last week we had an incident where in lifetime the city manager had to review, I guess, the PowerPoint as we're conducting the meeting. That is not a good look for our citizens. So I don't know where the error fell, if it fell with the person presenting or where it was, but it just was not a good look. Thus would be more of the reason that I am asking for these presentations in a timely manner. Be it 1 week or 2 weeks, I don't care, but it can't be the night before, or nor should it be during the meeting. That's a problem.
Definitely called into question the integrity of what was being presented.
Okay, and I vote for 2 weeks as well, because we only meet every couple months, so it's not like we're the regular meeting that happens every other week. So do we have 2 weeks as a consensus?
2 weeks is fine.
All right, okay, that goes. Then the last thing I just want to bring up, recently because of budgets, I've been going through all the different strategic and master plans that we have paid for over the years and how closely we are adhering to them. And I just wanted to bring this up. We have 30 goals that were designed in 2023 that are very detailed out, but they weren't prioritized. And I think it would be a very good idea if we put these together in a bullet point and say where we are on them, and then have the group say this is a priority 1 or priority 2, because we seem to be cherry picking stuff rather than put it in an organized fashion. But if all of you haven't seen it, this is a very detailed document. All we're missing is what's first, what's second, what's third, what's fourth. And if we can have the staff maybe put that together, you think that would be an issue?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just to verify, are you looking at the CRA master plan?
The CRA, yeah, it's the 24 goals, and then all the different things to get those goals.
That sounds doable. We could do that. I think that's a good effort.
And there's no follow-up, so I don't know where we are on any of those goals, and it'd be great for all of us to see that.
Can I accentuate 2 things? in the future, when we're discussing an item, such as when can we get this report on how much, no offense to the staff, we're the board, we tell them, I want to see it in 60 days. If it's unreasonable, let them come back and say that. So that's point number one. I think we need to be a little bit more, we need to use our positions as they are in order to get things done
More
sooner.
intentional.
Huh? Intentional, there you go. Second thing is, and I mentioned this to the city council before, your comment, unless followed with, can I get a consensus, is just your comment. So it's not going to get acted upon. So just keep that in mind too, as when you move forward on things. So, and that's all that I have.
Anita, do you have anything for us
Report,
tonight?
thank you.
Mr. Maslow?
No report, thank you.
Seeing no other reports, adjourned. This is such a good document.
Yeah, I got to take a look at it again. It's part of the CRA.
It's unreal because it has all how to do it.
Yeah.
It's the whole,
And that would be the basis for your infrastructure.
yeah.
I don't think we need to. That's the best to be done. My opinion. See you tomorrow.
10-4.
Hey, see you, Matthew.